Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Kathy was born and raised in a rural family. Her mother worked on the farm all her life. Her father worked as a driver. Kathy and her sister Christina rustled around the house from a small age, cleaning, cooking, tending to the livestock. Parents didn't have time. They earned money. They came home tired in the evening and their daughters looked after them. They would set the table, pour tea, and carry clean towels after washing. It was the order of the day then. Kathy dreamed of being a teacher from childhood. Perhaps her first teacher played a big part in that. It was a beautiful, very intelligent young girl, barely graduated from the institute. She spoke competently and calmly, knew the answers to all questions, and skillfully motivated the class to successful study. She had no laggards. Even the weakest tried and stretched to please Mrs. Anna. Kathy remembered crying when her favorite teacher's practice was over and she went home. She hadn't been the only one upset. Since then, the girl had firmly decided that when she grew up, she would become a teacher, as good and kind as Ms. Anna. So Kathy never changed her mind. She studied well and, having finished school, easily entered the university. Life in the city began to get strange. That Metals, a room in the dormitory. It was so unusual. The girl had never been separated from her parents and sister Christina for longer than a couple of days. And here it was all of a sudden. It was scary and hard at first. But Kathy quickly got used to it. She liked her studies, her classmates, her teachers. The girl realized more and more clearly. She had chosen the right path. Being a teacher is really her calling. After receiving her diploma, Kathy got the first job in her life. She was taken in the local city school, also in the prestigious language gymnasium. And the salary offered such a young girl could not dream of. Kathy plunged headlong into her work. She liked everything and to teach, and answer the numerous questions of her kids, and write notes for lessons, and deal with interesting and difficult cases for the pedagogical council. A young specialist was noticed and appreciated. It was nice to receive compliments from experienced colleagues. Kathy felt really happy. Christina, her sister, had also moved to the city by then. Graduated from the College of Economics. She got a job at a meat packing plant in the administrative office. Even got married, and very happily. James, the son of the director of the plant, fell in love with the pretty young employee. He was from a wealthy family, handsome, educated, witty. Perhaps his parents were at first against the bride's misbehavior from the village. But after recognizing her, they grew to love and accept her. Of course they did. Beautiful, hardworking, faithful, kind. The young lived in their own apartment, which had 3 spacious rooms and a huge loggia. This miracle was given to them at the wedding by James's parents. Kathy was sincerely happy for her sister. But her personal life was not going well. Back in her university days, Kathy had several failed romances. They all followed the same pattern. First, the girl became enchanted with the next suitor. She began to see him as an ideal man. Prepares in her mind for marriage. Then came the epiphany. Wearing heartache and almost disgust to the one who recently was the meaning of life, Kathy. For some reason, her beau turned out to be infantile and spoiled creatures and egoists, not independent, weak. No, with such Kathy could not connect her life. Bitterness, disappointment after each breakup remained for a long time. That's why Kathy decided to take a break. Well, these men, they're just frustrating. It's better to get down to work on her career. And then, one day in the life of a young teacher appeared he, Andrew, a modest, even a little stiff and short guy with blue eyes and a nice smile. For the first time, they sought each other in the school gym. On the eve of September 1, Andrew was leading a team of craftsmen who were hurriedly finishing the school renovation. The young men met their eyes. Kathy immediately realized that this man hooked her something. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. He was not so handsome, quiet, and unremarkable. And he flared to the roots of his hair at the sight of Kathy and turned away, embarrassed. It looked very sweet and touching. Kathy realized that he liked him too, at first sight. Then Kathy met Andrew every day, and he invariably hid his eyes from her. But the girl began to notice that the guy secretly looks at her when he thinks that she does not see it. And it was very pleasant and exciting. And one day, Andrew suddenly gathered courage. It was already on the eve of the handover. One last chance to get to know each other. Job done. Andrew has nothing more to do at the school, so he'd never see Kathy again. So the boy decided to take a desperate and difficult step. Andrew spoke quietly and just no florid phrases, but his speech was so sincere, so touching. Kathy, of course, melted and agreed to go out with the guy. Andrew did not even realize that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time and was beginning to worry that she would never get it. And what to do then? She wasn't going to hang herself around his neck. Andrew invited Kathy to the movies. The girl was not worried before the first date. She could see that she really liked Andrew. She felt warmth coming from him and therefore was sure that their meeting would go as it should. If only Andrew would relax a little. He's very shy. After that first date, Kathy realized that Andrew was completely her person. They were so good, so easy together. Both told each other about their lives and destinies. Andrew was raised by his grandmother. His parents died when the boy was only 6 years old. So there he was left with his paternal grandmother, who was already a very old woman. She was an old-school lady and believed that children should be brought up in strictness, especially boys. So Andrew's childhood could not be called happy, warm, and carefree. No, the boy didn't complain. He just told me how he grew up. This is Kathy, sensitive and attentive Kathy. She drew her own conclusions. She felt sorry for this wonderful boy. She wanted to hug him, kiss him, to give him some warmth and care. I mean, that's all he needed. When Andrew was a kid, he went into the army after school. Then he came back, trained as a welder. But he didn't get a job in his profession. But he became a foreman. Repair crews are also bread and butter. Still, the boy never gave up hope of becoming a welder. And the wages are better there. And he'd studied so much for a reason. Andrew lived in a rented apartment, just like Kathy, when he was just a kid. Clever relatives had sold the parents' house, the boy's orphanage. There was no end in sight. So the boy had to start from scratch. But he was not discouraged and did not complain about life, although fate treated him rather unfairly. Andrew was very kind and caring, unlike Kathy's previous beau. He always wondered if she was hungry, and on chilly evenings he threw his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm with Andrew. The girl felt loved and desired. He seemed to be willing to do anything for her. It was a wonderful feeling. Kathy realized that she had fallen in love, and the feeling was completely mutual. There wasn't even any doubt. Andrew looked at her with such eyes and tried so hard to do everything to make her feel good around him. It was impossible not to notice. Kathy was not surprised when Andrew proposed to her. And of course, she had happily accepted right away. She had wanted to live next to Andrew for a long time. In one apartment, they would take care of each other, support each other, and it would be more fun together. Kathy was tired of returning to an empty, cold room. Christina was not at first delighted with her sister's choice. You're young, you're pretty, you could easily find someone more wealthy. How many friends does my earring have? They're all handsome and sons of wealthy parents, and they're like cheese in butter. What about this Andrew? Nikolai is not yard, not work normal. But when she recognized Andrew, the best Christina changed her mind. You have a good one. Smiled her sister, shared her impressions with Kathy. Very kind and loves you very much. You'll do well together. You'll achieve everything. You can't miss out on a man like that. I'm so happy for you. Andrew and Kathy got married. They lived in his rented apartment, and Kathy's golden years began. The young husband tried to help his wife with everything. He did a lot of things for her, and even as he had dreamed, he found a new job. He got a job as a welder at a construction site, took part-time jobs, did not refuse the opportunity to poke around, as he was going to get his own apartment. Andrew dreamed of buying a 3-room apartment in a prestigious neighborhood where there are a lot of good schools and playgrounds, so that his and Kathy's future children had a happy childhood. Andrew often made surprises to his young wife. He would give her a ring for no reason, or just come home with a bouquet. Kathy felt the happiest in the world and thanked fate for sending her such a loving and caring husband. The young couple talked for hours and discussed movies and life stories, friends and relatives. They made plans. Sometimes they argued. Not without that, but they always came to a compromise in the end. They liked the same movies and books. They both discovered new and interesting things about each other. For example, with Andrew, Kathy got into hiking in the woods. Andrew, thanks to his young wife, loved the theater. Kathy was sure that she and Andrew were soulmates, halves of one whole. Even though the couple lived poorly, they had enough to live on. But both excesses like a luxury car or annual trips to the sea. There was no speech yet, but both were happy with what they had each other and often discussed that chance meeting at school, which might not have been. Take Kathy, a vacation in August, as her superiors had suggested to her. And then Alex was born. How did the young couple rejoice at his arrival? The new father was glowing with pride, taking his son Andrew in his arms for the first time. He turned out to be a wonderful parent, attentive, sensitive, caring. He could spend hours after work driving around with the stroller to give his young wife a break. But Kathy most often went for a walk with her husband. It was so pleasant to walk together with Andrew, holding the handle of the stroller and in a low voice, so as not to wake up his son, to talk to the man you love about everything in the world. The young parents liked to make plans for the future of their apartment. They still didn't have one. But the amount in the bank account was slowly but surely growing. Just a little bit more, and the couple will be able to afford to buy their own home from Christina's sister Kathy. At the same time, their daughter Helen was born. Young moms often went to visit each other and together learned the wisdom of caring for babies. The sisters shared advice, discussed the successes and failures of their babies. Kathy felt truly happy, and her husband is so loving and understanding. And her sister is close by. The young couple often dreamed about how their son would grow up. Surely he will be smart, kind, brave, will become, perhaps, a scientist or a master of all hands. And they and parents will try to ensure that the innate talents of their child to open and gain strength. It is only necessary to be attentive and patient. Andrew planned to study a lot with his son, to support him and always be there for him in a difficult moment. Kathy was glad that it was easy and calm at heart. The two of them and cope, raise a child a good man. But the dreams of the couple were not destined to come true. A few years after the birth of their son, misfortunes one after another fell on their small family. First came the financial crisis, as a result of which the couple's savings depreciated. They were only a few days away from buying their own apartment. The goal was so close. But after what had happened, the money accumulated in their account could only buy a couple of winter jackets. And that's if you're very lucky. Alex was already in daycare. Kathy was out of maternity leave. The couple took it hard. They even cried. I don't know what to say. Andrew couldn't help but cry. He thought his wife couldn't see, but she saw everything. The man even looked for an apartment he'd been dreaming of for a long time. Spacious, 3-room, not far from a large school and the Palace of Sports, where Alex could do swimming. And then such a blow. But there was no time to indulge in despondency for a long time. Hard times came. Salaries at Kathy's school began to be delayed for months. Things weren't going too well on the building site either. Andrew's main income now came from coven members. The man spent days working part-time jobs to feed his family. Time passed. Alex was growing up. It was time for him to go to first grade. The family seemed to adapt to the new conditions. Andrew was allowed to stay afloat. The man again made plans for his own apartment. There were hopes for a better life. A happy future loomed ahead. And then tragedy struck at the construction site. Andrew was working unofficially. The owners of the facilities saved money on everything and didn't care much about safety. Andrew knew he was taking a risk, but he was always careful and acted as carefully as possible. But this time, on the construction of a supermarket building, the man fell off from the height of the 3rd floor right onto the concrete blocks piled piles and below. Of course, Andrew did not survive. Arriving in an ambulance, doctors had only to state the man's death. Kathy was not told the terrible news until the morning. For her, the whole world turned upside down in that second. She could not even cry for a long time. The woman felt her soul and heart literally torn in half. She didn't want to live. How and why get up in the morning if there is now no nearest and dearest person? Kathy realized that she would never meet someone like Andrew again. There was no one else like him, and she didn't need anyone else. She missed his smile, his look, the smell of warmth. It was physically painful to not be able to hug a loved one. There were his things around him: clothes, books, glasses. But Andrew himself would never come home again, would never hug her and her son, would never joke with them. How to accept that? To dull the pain, Kathy even took up the bottle. Kathy realized, of course, that this was a road to nowhere. But at that moment, she didn't care, just as long as she could get rid of the unbearable pain for a moment. There's no telling what would have happened to the woman if it hadn't been for Christina. She took Alex in for a while. She saw that his mother was not able not only to look after the child, but could not even cope with herself. Kathy didn't care. She took Alex, and that was fine. And she didn't even think about her own child's feelings at that time. But he was also in pain and scared. Strange as it may seem, Alex's illness brought Kathy back to life. He caught pneumonia and went to the hospital. Christina came to her sister in tears to tell her what had happened. She felt guilty. She hadn't looked after her nephew. He had a high fever and was delirious. The doctor and I thought it was stress at first. After all, the father's dead and the mother's in a state of confusion. But then it became obvious it was more serious than that. He was in intensive care for 24 hours. He seems better now, but the doctor says it's too early to relax. And your drinking, it's a threshold to get back into life. You can't go back. Now we're going to lose another boy. This situation brought Kathy back to life. She was more scared for her son than she'd ever been in her life. She pulled herself together, stopped drinking. She got her job back. And of course, she became a caring and loving mother again. Every day, Kathy went to visit her son in the hospital. At first, she stood under the windows, and then, when Alex was allowed to go out, she walked with him for hours on the hospital yard. Alex grew up immediately. Trouble had turned a 7-year-old boy into a little old man with sad eyes. He was surprisingly thin, pale, and silent. Looking at her son, Kathy realized that he was under deep stress. Her baby is traumatized. He needs a strong mother. And she, Kathy, took risks to remove, drowned in her own grief, forgetting about the native man, so much in need of her support. Kathy has been the perfect mother ever since. Attentive, totally focused on her son, caring. In the city, Kathy couldn't hold on. It was too expensive to rent an apartment. The woman didn't make that much money. She had to return to the village. Father was already gone, and his life was taken away by a heart attack 2 years earlier. And my elderly mother was in great need of support and care. It was already hard for her to cope with the household on her own. So Kathy's move came very well. Alex went to the first grade of the village school. Kathy got a job there as a teacher, but soon she had to think about changing jobs. The salaries in that school were very different from the salaries. In the city gymnasium, on such crumbs was simply could not live, and Kathy had to pull the child alone on his feet, to put him on his feet. And then a neighbor, Aunt Nura, offered a good option. Her nephew had a point at the central market in the city. He sold clothes and shoes and accessories. He needed a salesman, someone decent, someone he could trust, a salary. Aunt Tyrin, the nephew, promised a good one. He also offered a percentage of the proceeds. 2 by 2, Kathy was also quite satisfactory. It was hard, of course, to part with the dream job. After all, teaching kids is Kathy's true calling. The woman knew from childhood what she wanted to be. But what can you do when times are so hard? They've got to eat something with Alex. What wouldn't you do for a child? With great regret, Kathy left school. She missed her students, her coworkers, and her school life for a long time. Her heart sank every time she saw uniformed children on the street. But Kathy was facing new realities. Working the market was hard. capricious customers who themselves do not know what they want, scandalous traders, competitors, heavy financial responsibility. And the road took a lot of time and effort. All the same, in the days when Kathy went to work, she had to get up neither light nor dawn and walk almost 2 kilometers to the nearest stop, through which the bus to the city. But the paycheck was good. Now Kathy could buy her son and beautiful clothes and toys. And even to the sea, they flew to the resort every summer. And her mother helped to look after her son. She was already, of course, very old. But she had enough time and energy for her grandson. Kathy often went to visit Christina. She did not work, was busy with the house and her daughter could afford. Her husband earned enough to provide for the family. Christina often felt sorry for her sister. How did your fate turn out? You work like a horse, spinning as hard as you can. I even feel awkward about being a housewife, and you. Everyone has his own fate, sighs Kathy. I'm not complaining about mine. We all have something for nothing. Kathy was genuinely happy about Christina's life. She adored both her sister and her niece Helen Christina, but her daughter. The 4 of them often went out together. They'd go out together. All in all, they lived close together. It was Christina who advised Kathy to save some money and invested in shares of a large company. James says it's the right thing to do. We have a lot of money invested in those stocks ourselves. My husband's sure it'll be great in the end. And James is smart, he knows. Kathy listened to her sister, and without saying a word to anyone, she bought a few shares. The capital grew, but it was impossible to get rich very slowly thanks to such interest, as it seemed at first. But Kathy decided to let the money lie on deposit. But she did not tell her son or her mother about the shares. I don't think they'll approve. They'll say it's all a waste of money. Let the family live in peace. So Kathy had her own little secret. Now she was saving money, buying stocks, saving for a happy future for her son. Alex grew up a smart, athletic boy, unlike his modest, quiet father. Alex was the soul of the company. He always had a lot of friends, comrades. The guy walked a lot, laughed, socialized. He was a very cheerful and carefree person. Kathy, looking at her son, was happy to see what kind of a guy grew up. Confident, brave, smart. This was exactly the kind of son she and Andrew imagined when they walked around the neighborhood with a stroller. Alex dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but to enter the cherished faculty he lacked just a little. The guy had to go to the army. Returning, he decided to try his luck in the city. His mother supported her son's decision and even helped financially. She rented Alex an apartment. Go, try, dare. Just be careful and know that no matter what happens, you can always come home to this house. Thank you, Alex smiled. But I'm not going back. I'm going to make my way in the city. There are so many opportunities there, so many prospects that something will work out. Goodbye, smiled Kathy. It was scary to let her son go, but what can you do? The boy had grown up. It was time for him to start his own life. Alex enrolled in a construction college and at the same time got a job at a factory. He studied, worked, and paid for his own apartment. He often came to the village to visit his mother and grandmother. He always showed up with gifts and funny stories. Kathy's mother had completely given up. She hardly ever left the house, and sometimes she didn't even recognize her own daughters. One day she had a heart attack. Kathy called an ambulance. Mom was taken to the hospital. The old woman never came back. What do you want, age? The doctor sighed tiredly. No one is eternal. Kathy and Christina organized a funeral in the village. A lot of people gathered for the wake. After all, everyone here knew Mom. Then Christina told her sister to take over her parents' house. I don't need that half of the inheritance. I don't need it. You know I don't. What about you? You took care of your mom the last few years. That's hard work. So it's only fair that you get the house. Kathy didn't mind. She really needed her own place. Old age was fast approaching. The woman was sometimes surprised at how quickly her life flew by. It seemed that she and Andrew Alex had just been born. They were young, full of plans and hopes, beautiful. And now Alex is a grown-up, independent man. Andrew is not, and she herself is almost an old woman, that ahead only pension and quiet, peaceful existence in a village house. The only hope is in Alex. Here he will get married. His grandchildren will be born. The kids will come to visit their grandmother. Then the joy in life will appear. By the way, Alex is a good man. He did not give up his dream of law school. He got in after all. It was hard for him to work and study, but he'll get through it. Kathy, if anything, will help and support him. Christina said it was time to live for himself. You're young, you're still beautiful. Alex has grown up. Now you can treat yourself. Your salary is not bad. You even have savings. Let's fly to Italy or Greece. You've never been abroad. We'll take a walk there and have a vacation. What, Greece? What, Italy? Kathy smiled back. I have a grown-up son, Ivan, will soon get married. Probably he will need to help with the wedding and the apartment. That's what I'm saving up for. I don't have time for a vacation. Your son is a healthy, grown-up man. He's so strong and handsome. He'll manage on his own. You have to think about yourself sometimes. But Kathy didn't agree with her sister. She likes to talk easily in front of her husband like that. And Kalenka was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. She has a future for 100 years ahead planned and secured. True, the nephew was good, despite the rich parents, and grew up wise, modest, judicious. Simple, such a natural, pleasant, very independent too. Like Alex, she's been working since she was young. Golden girl. When Kathy had argued with her sister that Alex would need her support for the foreseeable future, she'd been right on the money. Shortly after that conversation, the son came to visit his mother for the weekend. He was mysterious, not as he always was. Kathy immediately realized that something was wrong. The woman quickly set the table and put out her son's favorite treats: fried potatoes with mushrooms, pancakes, and pickles from the cellar, and then watched with pleasure as Alex absorbed it all to satiety. The young man shared with his parents an amazing news: Mom, I'm getting married. As Kathy splashed her hands, went on, the calm questions fell from her like from a cornucopia. The woman is filled with a mass of emotions: joy, of anxiety, surprise. Her name is Julia. You're gonna love her. I'm bringing her here next weekend. You two should get to know each other before we get married. Just wanted to warn you first. Kathy nodded her head with a smile. She knew, of course, that this moment would come sooner or later, but still found herself caught off guard by the news. But wow, Alex is getting married, all grown up. Julia worked as a waitress in a cafe. The guy often came to eat at this place. That's how they met. Julia's from the country too. The son shared details. She was raised by a single mother too. See how much we have in common. Julia came to the city to go to law school. Another amazing coincidence. She dreamed of working for the police, helping to catch criminals, but she's so frail, so thin. What kind of policeman would she be? Julia didn't make it. She failed her college exams, but the girl did not want to return home to the village. What would she do there? She grew up in a small, remote village in a poor family. Her mother had 5 younger children besides her. Julia didn't want to go back to her old life, so she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. She rented a room in a dormitory and lived on her own, working slowly. How long have you two been together? 6 months almost made Alex smile. From that smile, Kathy realized that her son was head over heels in love. She's nice. Takes care of me. She cleans the house. She cooks. I mean, we've been living together for 4 months in my rented apartment. I proposed to her the other day. That's how Kathy got through. It's how much to prepare, and the dining room for the wedding to order, and outfits for the bride and groom to find and host, hire, and menu. Think through, and the invitation to send out to moms. We decided that we can do without all that. Just answered Alex. We'll sign everything quietly in the registry office and everything as you want, nodded Kathy. She had painted in her head the image of a perfect wedding for her only son a long time ago. It was a cheerful celebration with a crowd of dressed-up guests, a ringing toastmaster, a huge cake, and a table full of treats. Cars decorated with balloons and ribbons, dancing, a beautiful bride and a happy groom. But since the young people decided differently, so be it. It's their holiday after all. The following weekend, Alex arrived at his mother's house with his bride. Kathy was confused, prepared a royal chair, and made salads and meat, spared from the appetizers, stacked on the composed. Kathy was very excited. She wanted to please her future daughter-in-law, to show Julia that she was very much expected in this house. They were preparing for the arrival of the dear guest, as long as not to say the wrong thing, so that Alex was ashamed of her mother. Then it didn't happen. Julia turned out to be a thin girl and not tall. Big dark eyes, thin eyebrows, and a spread of thick silk. She was dressed simply but tastefully, an elegant dress, low-heeled shoes. At first, the guests and the hostess felt a little constrained. Julia, looking around carefully, was silent. Apparently, she was embarrassed to say a word. Only after a while did Kathy realize that this modesty was feigned. Julia was just looking around. She was choosing tactics of behavior, drawing conclusions. The atmosphere at the table was moving. Alex joked, amused his ladies, throwing up interesting topics for conversation. He was always so lively, energetic, companionable. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that Julia was indeed from a very poor and disadvantaged family. The girl charmed Kathy at the first meeting with her modesty. Bride Alex had a very sweet smile, and how she looked at her fiancé. In her eyes shone tenderness and love. The guy, however, answered Julia in the same way. He held her hand, now and then took her by the waist. There was love and harmony between the young people. Kathy looked at them and her heart rejoiced. Alex and Julia were married. Kathy suggested the young people to have a party in a cafe. All right, not a real wedding with a toastmaster and cars, but they could have a proper celebration with their friends. She even set aside money for it. Kathy had savings. Over the years, the woman managed to put aside a certain amount, plus stocks bought on her sister's advice. They'd grown a lot. At first, Kathy dreamed of buying an apartment in the city, but then realized that in the village she lives well. Quiet, calm people, familiar and friendly around. Kathy liked the very atmosphere reigning in her village. Closer to retirement, the woman realized that she did not want to move anywhere. But she could. She had enough money for a small apartment. But never mind, her son could still use it. Only Christina's sister knew about the savings. Kathy didn't talk about her wealth, not even to her son. She wanted Alex to grow up independent, that he as a man, himself tried to earn money for housing and something to achieve in life. But it will not work out. His mother will always help him in a difficult situation. There are means only for the time being. He shouldn't know that. Let him make his own way. The money was in a bank account. Kathy had invested some of it in stocks a few years ago on the advice of her sister's husband, and the money was now generating a good income. For her son's wedding, Kathy had withdrawn from the account. The amount she had estimated would be enough for a lavish celebration. She wanted to give them a present. On her son's next visit, she handed Alex a puffy envelope. Wow, he was amazed. He poked his nose inside. What a surprise. Where'd you get it? I saved up, Kathy smiled. Make yourself a holiday like you want to go out to a restaurant with your friends. Don't deny yourself anything, have fun. Thank you, smiled Alex. But we better save this money for renting an apartment. Why do you need to rent an apartment and already earn money? And the wedding, it is in general once in a lifetime, only happens. Well, ideally, of course. I have problems with my job, Alex admitted. They pay pennies, and it's unstable there. I'm just in danger of getting sick. And Julia, that she does not earn enough. A waitress does not pay millions. It's okay. Kathy patted his grown son on the shoulder. Alex is all grown up. He's a big man himself, and his problems are just as grown up. Already financial issues sadden him. He's thinking about supporting his family. I feel sorry for him, of course. Yes, everyone goes through such things. Don't worry, son. When you finish your studies, you'll find a better job. You're my good boy. You're so smart and handsome. You'll be such an educated man. If you're such a man, they'll take you everywhere. They won't take you. Alex sighed even harder. I was expelled, as Kathy added. Why for truancy? Alex said quietly. Kathy was almost crying, son. In her dreams, she had already seen her son as a graduated lawyer, successful, competent, highly paid. And now all of a sudden it's news like this, just like that. Alex looked at his mother with irritation. I had to work a lot, so I didn't get to classes. I had a lot of absences. I thought they'd come out. They didn't, so I got expelled. No big deal. Kathy pulled herself together. Alex needs a little encouragement now. You'll learn. Not the first and not the last. Yes, I do not want to finish studying. Alex got angry. I'm a grown man. I'm sitting in the pears, pants rubbing. It's funny. You have to earn money, not suffer with nonsense. Kathy did not argue with her son. Not in that. He was now in a state of nothing. Then she will change his mind. Education is necessary for a young man. Otherwise, you can't build a career. A woman is sure to convey this to her grown-up only child. Now it is necessary to support him, to calm him down, to encourage him. Well, if you don't want a wedding, do with this gift of mine. What do you wish? Nodded Kathy Alex. Thank you. Alex's mom smiled gratefully and happily. We could really use the money right now. We're happy to help. You're all grown up and practical. Others would be happy to spend money on a holiday. But you're thinking about the future. I have to, sighed Alex. The son left, and Kathy stayed home with a heavy heart. Alex was also worried now. He didn't finish his studies. No decent job, no place to live. Now he's getting married. If children will go, Alex will have to work at unskilled work from morning till night to provide for his family. And this is not the future Kathy dreamed of for her only child. He's a grown man, he'll figure it out. Calmed her sister Christina in the evening on the phone. What are you worried about? You've done everything I asked of you. It's up to him now. Maybe give him money for an apartment. I've consulted with anyone. It's easier. The young will at least pay for the rent. Let him pay. The older sister objected. Don't even think of mentioning that money now. They'll sit on their necks and weigh their legs down. But they'll try to climb up. Maybe they'll succeed. You can always give them the apartment. It's not time yet. You are right, you, Christina, are right completely, of course, grinned my sister. And you come to visit me. Tomorrow come to the movie with you, go to a cafe. Sit. You need to unwind. Again, Christina, you're right, smiled Kathy. What a blessing that she has such a sister. A close person who will always support and cheer up. Alex and Julia got married. The signing took place in the city registry office modestly and quietly. Kathy, Christina with Rudit, and two of Julia's girlfriends attended the ceremony. Then a small group of people modestly celebrated the events in a cafe. We sat only a little. We made a few toasts to the newlyweds, gave the newlyweds presents, and dispersed. Julia had to go on shift. Alex was waiting at work, too. Kathy stretched out disappointedly when she and her sister were alone. The women decided to do a little shopping. Come on, young people don't care now. Christina waved away carelessly. As long as they lived well. Did Alex live well with Julia? Kathy had no idea. The son tried not to talk to his mother about it. It was awkward for her to ask, to pry into the soul of an adult. The young people came to visit occasionally. Julia behaved politely, but coldly and aloofly. Kathy noted that the young couple seemed to have a good relationship. Alex's job was not going well. He changed places and employers, looking for a decent income, but nothing worked out. Alex didn't want to think about going back to university. Kathy several times wanted to tell her son that she had a safety cushion, which she was ready to give him. She wanted to encourage Alex to take that desperation out of his eyes. But the woman delayed. We need to let the young ones try to get back on their feet on their own. It's important. It's not like they're so needy right now. Yes, it's hard. But they're two adults who should be able to cope. But if there's a child, then it's a different matter. Children should live in normal conditions with calm, peaceful parents. Several years passed. The situation in my son's family did not change. He was still looking for a job. Alex, from a cheerful joker of a joker, turned into a frowning man. Kathy thought it was because of money problems. But one day she accidentally witnessed a conversation between her son and Julia. The couple came to visit Kathy Petrovna. Lately it happened less and less often. The woman went to the kitchen to take out of the oven forbidden with apples goose. and when she returned with a tray in her hands, she managed to witness an ugly scene. "You're just a lowlife." Julia looked at Alex with dislike. "You can't do anything." Married Andrew. He gave her a cool phone for her birthday. And they're going on vacation to the Emirates soon. And you can't even find money for a spa for the woman you love. We're about to be evicted from our apartment for non-payment. Alex silently lowered his head. He had nothing to object. Probably the young man felt at this moment really full of nothing. Kathy's heart squeezed with pity for his son. Wow, Julia often humiliates him like this. Once when she was visiting, she couldn't help herself, and the son was too used to hanging his head. He wasn't even surprised and didn't even try to defend himself. Julia's a real piece of work. He's so modest and pretend at first. And herself. Kathy had a hard time pulling herself together. You can't show your true feelings about the situation. In fact, she must pretend she hadn't seen or heard anything. Her interference will only spoil everything. Julia will then have the opportunity to call Alex a little son. But of course, she's going to give her mother-in-law a run for her money. That's for sure. No, let them deal with it themselves. They're adults. For the rest of the evening before the young ones left, Kathy stayed neutral. Talked on distracted topics, smiled at both spouses, and tried not to notice the sunken sadness in her son's eyes. When the children left, many things became obvious to Kathy. Alex is head over heels in love with Julia. That much is clear. He's willing to go to great lengths for her. He tries, he fights, but he can't get anywhere. Largely because Alex never finished his studies, and he didn't finish his studies just because of Julia. The guy has to work hard to provide for his lover's needs. Kathy got herself back. You have to be objective. It was still Alex's choice to drop out of university and get a job. Yes, a lot of it was out of a desire to please Julia. But Alex made the decisive step himself. How and how to help his son now? Kathy thought again about the money in the account. Should she give it to Alex? Let him buy an apartment. Julia would be delighted. She approves. In serious matters, Kathy is used to consulting her sister. Gianna called her. "You're crazy," Christina exclaimed after hearing her sister's reasoning. "Under no circumstances do not buy an apartment now. Don't you realize that it will be considered as jointly acquired property in marriage? They've only been together a week. What if they get a divorce? Julia would take half of it without blinking an eye. I understand if they had kids. Then at least the grandkids would get everything. And now it's going to someone else. You worked hard. You didn't earn money for this spinning your tail. Oh, it's hard being the mother of a grown son." Kathy sighed. She realized her sister was right again. So many nuances to keep in your head. It's not easy being a mother at all, her sister parried. But it's nice sometimes. A few more years passed. Kathy saw that her son was unhappily married. Alex was still looking for a decent living. He did all sorts of things, and Vactang, and already worked, and tried to open a business, and worked as a trucker, but nowhere for a long time. What was going on? The company went bankrupt, or he didn't pass the medical examination. Finally, Alex gave up. Tired. It's hard to work and be disappointed. One day he came to his mother suddenly, unannounced, alone. "We are not pulling the life in the city," he sighed. "It's expensive for us. We'll come back for the first time with you. We'll live. You don't mind?" "No." Shook her head in surprise. "That's good," nodded Alex. "In that case, we'll come next week." Kathy was at a loss after her son's departure. Are they going to live together here in the village? What kind of a strange decision. There are no jobs here. What Alex and Julia are counting on. But the woman did not argue with her son. She saw that he's already having a hard time. All right, let them try. They are probably just looking for a way out of a difficult situation. They're also considering a life in the countryside. Well, we can do that, since the city didn't work out. Life together with Alex and Julia began with the division of territory. "Mom, we will live in the living room," said Alex. "Why?" Kathy was surprised. She had prepared for the young corner of her bedroom. In her opinion, it was the most cozy room and remote. The young people would live more quietly there. Living room, Kathy liked to rest here watching TV, and the neighbors often dropped by. There was plenty of room in the living room for friends. Because it was the biggest and brightest room, Alex answered simply. Then Kathy realized that her son was broadcasting Julia's will. He always tried to please his wife in everything. He loved his young wife more than his father's life and took advantage of it. Julia immediately showed her true face to her mother-in-law. Did not even try to pretend anymore, polite or modest. She didn't like everything Kathy did. And her mother-in-law didn't cook right. Too fatty, unhealthy. And the server's table was sluggish, wrong. And she didn't even know how to mop the floors. Julia would often admonish Kathy with a look of contempt. That it's you who rattles the dishes in the morning and disturbs your sleep, or are your friends laughing too loud? Couldn't you get together somewhere else in the evening? At first, Kathy was at a loss for words at her sister-in-law's insolence. Then, of course, she thought of appropriate responses to Julia's barbs. She wanted so much to remind her that she was not in her own house. Accordingly, she should behave more modestly. But Kathy lingered. For her son's sake, of course. The woman saw. Alex is very attached to Julia. He loves her, idolizes her. The young husband tried to fulfill his wife's every whim. There were many whims. The man failed and felt guilty. Julia was suspicious of elegy, this feeling of guilt. Often she mentioned husbands, boyfriends, her acquaintances who overpowered the women they loved with jewelry and literally overwhelmed them with money. Kathy understood the purpose of what was being said. Julia was manipulating Alex, played on his feelings, used her spouse to suppress him. But she wasn't even trying to open up to her son. He's not in the right state of mind right now anyway, too blinded by love and passion. Kathy sincerely did not understand what her son found in this Julia. Well, yes, she was pretty, but there's a lot of them out there, and now you're getting these feelings. It seemed that if Julia asked him to jump off a cliff, he would do it gladly. Alex got a job at the local sawmill. The work was hard, physically exhausting, but the pay was good, enough to take Julia into town from time to time, then to shopping, then to a restaurant. The young wife herself didn't bother to work. Well, where can I find a suitable place here in the village? She sighed. And in the city, every day do not go to the city. I traveled, Kathy suddenly remembered. I had no husband, no child to raise. So I drove from here to the central market every day. Why are you comparing times and situations? Julia sighed languidly. First of all, I am married, fortunately. After all, the responsibility for the material maintenance of the family lies on the man, not on the woman. Secondly, we are in no hurry to have children. I believe that it is silly to give birth to Beskov without a yard is terribly irresponsible. And thirdly, I'm going through such a period now. Do you think it's easy to work as a waitress on night shifts? To tolerate the antics of customers? I need to recuperate, get back to my old self. Kathy could have said a lot of things to her daughter-in-law, but she kept quiet. She kept quiet for her son's sake. He was having a hard enough time as it was. And now he's going to be caught between his mother and his wife, like between two fires. Kathy was well aware that her daughter-in-law was openly condemning her life. And this Julia to give birth to children without a stake, without a yard is irresponsible. I mean, that's a stone to her head. When did she and Andrew have Alex? The young family didn't have their own place yet. That's what the daughter-in-law was implying. The longer the young lived at Kathy's, the clearer the woman realized Julia manipulates Alex, makes him dance to his own tune, uses the spouse. The son is the one who is in love with the young beauty, put on the other in front of his eyes and left the spouse. Turns this situation in his favor. Julia herself clearly does not nourish a colleague any tender feelings. This is evident from her irritation, her dislike of the other look at the spouse. According to gestures, yes, a lot of them, these indicators, and how only the son does not notice. So why is Julia still with Alex? The answer is simple. Who else would work so hard for her? Where else would she find someone so loyal and obedient? Such a feeling as Alex has for Julia is rare, and the girl understands it perfectly well. She will try to make the most of the situation. And if suddenly there will be a more interesting option, she will easily leave Alex. Being confident in her own power, Julia behaved rudely with her mother-in-law right in front of Alex. The daughter-in-law must have realized that Kathy could see right through her. It was infuriatingly annoying and frightening, apparently. And how did Julia look at her mother-in-law? She felt superfluous in her own house, arrogant, full of contempt. Looks, shelves, remarks, reproaches. To have less contact with her daughter-in-law. Kathy now went to visit her neighbor herself. She also often traveled to her sister's house and even stayed overnight. Christina, of course, advised to put the initial Julia in her place. It's your house, after all, shook her sister's head. Remind her of that. Let them think about it now. Tell them you were separating. You were looking for a place to live. Otherwise, she's living on her own, and she's got a lot of nerve. I'll talk to her myself, if you're uncomfortable. No. Kathy waved his hands. No way. Alex is always on her side. It's hard enough for him. He didn't need to add to his frustration. Alex really did blindly believe everything his wife said. Kathy tried to be as polite as possible. I kept silent in response to her remarks. My sister-in-law uncomplainingly cleaned her plates, tolerated her reproaches. But Julia, apparently, still complained to her husband about his mother, put in an unsightly light. Mom, why are you picking on her? Sometimes the son would start a conversation. Julia is a wonderful woman. I love her. You mustn't think of her as an enemy. Try to make up with her. I didn't have a fight with her. Kathy tried to justify it. I'm trying not to talk to her at all. Any conversation turns in her direction, and she makes me her number one enemy. That's what it's all about. Alex shook his head sadly. Julia says, so you despise her, or do not notice, or come to reproach. The third is not given. Why do you make her work in the kitchen? Julia was going through a rough patch. She needed a vacation. So I just reminded her to clean up her plate. No one's making her work. I serve you myself. Alex looked at his mother with a sad look, and Kathy realized that everything is useless. He still will not believe that his wonderful Julia systematically turns the life of her husband and mother-in-law into a nightmare. Maybe he'll get to Alex someday, but not now. Julia masterfully turned Alex against his own mother, against the person who sheltered the couple in her house, gave them shelter, who, in fact, feeds them. Since Alex earns pennies at the sawmill, and the lion's share of his salary goes to pay off loans. In the city, the couple had managed to rack up loans that they now had to pay off. It was frustrating and painful. Kathy saw no way out of the situation. She only hoped that Alex would sooner or later see the light. Sometimes she wanted to kick the insolent youth out of the house, but that would mean losing her son forever. Julia manages to turn Alex against his mother on the spot. And here, if she throws them out of the house at a difficult moment. There's a lot of drama to be had here. Shakespeare would be jealous. And this house, to be honest, belonged to Alex. When her mother died, Kathy suddenly realized that such things usually happen suddenly. Yes, Mom was sick. She needed help, but there was no sign of her leaving so soon. Kathy thought about it a lot, because she might one day be gone just as suddenly. And then how would Alex be left with? The inheritance was 6 months away. Suddenly, some other claimants for this house will show up unexpectedly and heirs. My father had a complicated relationship with his relatives. Anything's possible. To protect Alex, Kathy, who was at that time the only owner of the house, wrote a gift deed to her son, and that was it. Her soul was at peace. Kathy was used to living for her only child. She did everything for him. Now the house officially belonged to Alex. And the son knew. It was true. At the time, Alex thought he wouldn't need the inheritance. He planned to settle down in the city, buy a nice apartment, that he's some country house. Who knew it would turn out like this? Kathy decided to be patient. It cost her a lot of strength to keep her temper in check and not take it out on Julia. And it wasn't good for her health either. But for the sake of her son, she could bear it as long as Alex was happy. If not for Christina and her sensible advice, Kathy would have spent all her savings on an apartment in the city for young people. But her sister was right. The woman understood that now more than ever, Julia doesn't like Alex. It's obvious. She's using him. If Alex buys an apartment, which will be considered jointly acquired property, the young spouse will immediately demand a divorce, and she will legally take half of the housing with her into her new life. And this is very good money. Well, no, we'll not wait, Julianka. Alex won't be blinded by this strange love for ages. Someday he'll see the light. That's when he'll need an apartment in the city for his new life. Too bad he can't get out of the house for free. Kathy had to put up with the antics and unfair reproaches of his sister-in-law. There was no end to it, but the woman understood. Now she's in no position to change anything. Christina, seeing that her sister was having a hard time, suggested we go on vacation together. Why don't we dispel all Kathy's phone calls and go sunbathing? We'll swim in the sea. We'll go on excursions. They'll be great. Go for it. In the end, Kathy gave in. She really needed a break from everything that was going on at home. Young people, let them live in the village house. Julia would have to cook and clean. They've spoiled her. Doesn't even help with the plate. She sits at home all day and the phone hangs out and watches soap operas. Julia, of course, expressed her opinion about Kathy's vacation. There is no money in the family, and some people go to resorts. She replied, somehow to Alexa's remark that his salary has been cut again. But here even the man who had angelic patience and in love with his wife could not stand it. Julia, what do you care? Mom earned it. She has the right. What about us? We have never been anywhere with you, and we'll make money. I promise. Kathy hid in her room without saying anything. She didn't have time to get into an argument with her sister-in-law. Things don't pack themselves. It had been a wonderful trip. Kathy and Christina rented a house in a small village by the Black Sea. The sisters walked a lot, swam in the warm waves, sunbathed, went on all sorts of excursions. Kathy once took a risk and realized an old dream, took a ride on a hydrocycle with a young and reckless driver. The spray in the face, the dizzying speed of the endless sea surface. So scary and so much fun. It's never been at the same time. What's their sea and excursions? The sisters even went to discos at night and danced as in their youth. Do not despair. Thank you, Christina, for pulling me out. Sincerely enjoyed, Kathy. I feel like I'm 10 years younger. By the way, that's exactly what it looks like. Christina smiled. You look better, more rested. You look great. And so it was. For the first time in years, Kathy liked herself in the mirror. She had a fresher glow. And most importantly, there was a sparkle in her eyes and life and energy in her face. Kathy felt that she had left behind all the problems and the cranky, demanding daughter-in-law, and the unsettled son, and the endless squabbles in the kitchen. There was a powerful reset. The woman felt strong, beautiful, and energetic. The world seemed bright and welcoming. Only good things were thought of. One day, the sisters came late and admired for a long time unusually large stars and bright yellow moon, which left a clear path on the sea surface. Beauty stretched out Kathy. It certainly was, agreed Christina. It's a shame, only to go back tomorrow. I can't believe it. I love it here so much. Another life, another world. It's back to the same old thing. It's driving them away. Christina couldn't take it anymore. Sitting on your neck and getting hard. She's sad. She'll wait for me. I'll come and clean up your mess. Don't. The Ataman protested. It will make things worse. There's no need to make things worse, grumbled Christina. There's nowhere else to go. Good evening, lovely ladies. A low, pleasant voice came from behind them. Both women shuddered with surprise and turned around. In front of them stood a man, slim, trim, with elegant gray hair on his temples. He was charming and had a very friendly smile. He was wearing jeans that went up to his knees and a loose black t-shirt. In all this, the stranger looked very stylish and attractive. And hello to you too, answered for the two of them Christina. Wonderful evening, isn't it? The man kept approaching. Kathy could not take her eyes off his smile. It made the stranger's face seem to glow. The man introduced himself as William, said he had just arrived here today, and checked into a room on the second floor of his sister's cafe. Just today, they were having dinner in this place, drinking wine, eating kebab, enjoying live music. William immediately noticed two beautiful, single ladies at the table and followed them to the shore. I apologize if I startled you. And don't think I'm a frivolous adventurer. It's just that you both have such kind smiles. I just wanted to get to know you better. I'm here all by myself. I'd like to find some company for socializing. If you don't mind. There's a problem with that. It's Christina's fault, she shrugged. I mean, we're leaving on a plane tomorrow at lunch. That's a shame. The smile slipped off William's face for a moment. Kathy was also sorry they wouldn't have the chance to get to know the man better. Surely it would have been even more fun and exciting for the three of them to spend their vacation together. There was something about William, something special. Kathy wanted to be near him, to look into his eyes, to admire the man's smile, to listen to him. Strange, the woman didn't remember anything like that happening to her in the last 30 years. And had it ever happened in her life at all? Well, if that's the case, we have one night left. William was smiling again. So let's make it a fun night to remember. I come here a lot. I'll show you places to see. You're coming with me. Kathy was ready to say yes right away, but Christina's careful. Christina, unlike her sister, didn't lose her head around the charming stranger. It's like we're seeing you for the first time, she smiled embarrassedly. I don't want to offend you, but it's right to slap yourself on the forehead. William. Of course, there are all sorts of lunatics and criminals nowadays. Of course you're wary, and so am I. Let's just walk along the promenade then. There's a lot of people here. I don't want to part with you. That's the way to humor Christina. Kathy realized her sister was pleased that William was not offended. It was a wonderful walk. The sisters and their new acquaintance chatted and laughed without ceasing. Turns out William lives in New York and has his own business there, a chain of restaurants in the States. He's often there on business, meeting with winemakers, making contracts, shopping. Basically, he's growing the business. The man also told about his personal life, sincerely, without any secrets. He acted as if he had known Christina and Kathy for 100 years. William was widowed early. His daughter was only 9 years old at the time, and he never remarried because his daughter didn't want a stepmother living in the house. And the word of an only child was always law to William. You and Kathy are alike in that, Christina remarked. She too lives only with her son, tolerates a lot for his sake, allows him everything. Yes, William looked at Kathy with interest. The woman's eyes met his, and she flashed like a young woman. She even felt hot. That's a shame. Years later, I realized that's not the way to do it. My daughter grew up to be quite a spoiled brat, but she's doing well now. She found a husband who, like me, tolerates her whims and fancies, and lives quietly abroad, unfortunately. They've gone to a warm place, so I'm all alone. I have a job, friends, but still, after my daughter's departure, I feel empty in the house and in my soul. The trio partied until the wee hours of the morning, and it seemed as if they'd gone back to their youth. William clearly sympathized with Kathy. He tried to please her from time to time, taking her hand casually. Once he hugged her waist lightly and briefly. Kathy wanted that moment to last forever. The sisters reached their cottage only when the matchmaking began. William, of course, volunteered to see them off. I don't want to part with you, William confided. His eyes, of course, were on Kathy. Kathy, why do you blame the phones? Christina suddenly suggested. Why did we have such a good time? Why don't we come back again next year? We should call each other so we can have a vacation together. It'd be fun. That's obvious. That's a great idea. William says yes, I'm dictating my number. No, you better give me your phone number. Kathy complied with William's request with a smile. He deliberately held her hand in his as he took her cell phone. There was so much warmth from him, so much tenderness. Kathy wanted to dissolve into it all. It was a shame they had met so late. William quickly dialed his number from Kathy's cell phone. But there he smiled. Now we've exchanged phone numbers. We won't lose everything. Great, nodded Kathy. And she knew perfectly well that this phone exchange meant nothing. And the fairy tale that had almost begun would never really begin, because there was no tomorrow. Already today, she and anyone will fly home, and there again a cramped village house, a disgruntled daughter-in-law, a Willa son. And the problems hadn't gone anywhere, while she was away. William, today he's been out with them. Tomorrow he'll find someone else. A man like that, he's not for her. He's too handsome, successful, wonderful. Where would she go with someone like that? Sad, of course, but the truth of life. Ah, how he looked at you, smiled Christina, when the sisters were left alone. I wish someone would look at me with admiration someday. Well, just once. Oh, come on. Kathy waved you off with a smile. She knew that now she would often remember William for his soft voice, his delightful manners, his beautiful eyes. And let that man forget about her the very next day it didn't matter. William, he played a huge role in her life, although he himself did not even realize it. Kathy did not reach her home until the evening. She and Christina had managed to nap for a couple of hours before the flight, but Kathy still felt tired and broken. Sleepless night, flight, acclimatization. The door was unlocked. Alex must have forgotten to lock the gate when he got home from work. He's been tired lately. And then there was Julia, who knows what she was feeding her husband while she was away. It was hard to imagine a daughter-in-law cooking borscht for her husband. The windows in the house were open wide. The steady hum of the television came from inside. The evening news was on. Kathy was about to enter the house with a smile. When she heard Julia's voice, she was obviously in the kitchen. How? Very simple. I was telling off someone who was obviously Alex. Now will appear soon. We will send her for milk. And while she walks, we'll put her things out of the door. It's no big deal. We've agreed 100 times. What are you worried about? Isn't that too harsh? Asked in an uncertain voice Alex. She's my mother after all. And this is her house. Not hers, yours. Julia argued. You showed me the deed of gift. And if that's the case, why should I put up with her here? I mean, she's been harassing me on and on and on. Alex, I told you, she's trying to break us up. But let me leave then, because I can't live in a house with your mother anyway. Okay. Alex mumbled conciliatingly. As agreed, so we will act. You just look, don't give any slack. We do everything right, you know? Standing up for personal boundaries. We're good. Kathy was standing under the window, dead or alive. It slowly dawned on her that she just overheard him talking, and that she was about to be kicked out of the house, and that Alex had agreed to it. There was no way the older woman had expected such a thing. She even had dark flickers in front of her eyes. Her blood pressure must have skyrocketed. Kathy took a few deep breaths to pull herself together, let on a joyful look, and entered the native hay. Oh, hello, lusciously, Julia smiled. And we were waiting for you a little later. A cab was rushing by. I didn't have time to look back, Kathy. I brought you some presents. Oh, what an experience. No sharing. Julia was doing her best to feign some sort of joy at seeing you. Alex stood next to her, slumped and silent. And Kathy perfectly understood the reason for her son's sadness. Of course, it's not easy for him right now. But he can't put his wife in her place. She has too much influence on him. Oh, Kathy splashed Julia's hands. You go to Anna for fresh milk, please. I have soup boiling on the stove. I can't get away. Alex is very tired from work, and I'm sick. If you are not very tired, then of course, nodded Kathy, and left the house, already knowing what awaited her on her return. It was a good thing she had overheard the conversation. She would at least have time to prepare for a serious conversation with her son and his wife. Her suitcases. Kathy spotted the porch from afar. They stood orphaned, leaning against the wall, waiting for their hostess. The hope that Alex would stop his wife's insolent behavior melted like smoke. The woman went up on the porch, knocked on the door. There was a note from inside. Julia's voice sounded. Read it, and you'll understand everything. Goodbye. I don't need it. I need your note, Kathy said. I want to talk to you. I want to look you in the eye. The door swung open with a bang. Julia stood on the threshold. She looked haughtily at Kathy. Well, look, if that's what you want. Julia, why are you doing this to me? I've tried to be your friend. Haven't I? You piss me off. A young woman has split. You're judgmental. Everything's wrong. Everything's wrong. You make your own rules. I don't feel like I own the place. And Alex is fawning over you. Well, this is my home. gently reminded Kathy. That's why it's natural for me to make my own rules. Julia exclaimed again. Again, you insinuate that we live in your house. It's not your house, by the way. It's not yours, it's your son's. So you're the one living here. Then get out of here. You have a good pension, enough to rent. Thank you. You even packed my things, Kathy said calmly. And it took a lot of effort to stay calm. Crying. She will when she gets to Christina. Of course, she'll go to her sister's. Who else? Only there aren't many of them here. My stuff is just clothes. What about photo albums? Old books, letters? And this junk is heavy, sighed Christina. We threw it out. Kathy gasped. It was as if she'd been punched in the solar plexus. It was her family's history, old photographs, letters from Andrew and her parents, postcards, diaries Christina and Kathy had kept when they were young. The first drawings by Helen and Alex. All of it carefully stored in boxes and folders, neatly arranged on shelves on a rack and in the bedroom. Really? Was there nothing left? Julia looked at her mother-in-law with defiance. What is this habit of clinging to junk? The insolent girl grinned. What good are these dusty papers? It's even easier to breathe without them. Kathy, despite her condition, suddenly had a great idea. She even had to suppress a smile so as not to accidentally give herself away to Julia. Soon she would no longer feel like the mistress of the situation. In a couple of minutes, the expression of smugness would evaporate from her pretty face. So you all threw everything out of my room. Totally. It's gonna be our closet now. All the boxes, every single one of them. Did you even look inside? Some of it was looked at, some of it was just thrown away. Why is Julia suddenly tense? Were there documents or what? The documents can be recovered in case of emergency. Kathy sank down tiredly on the porch steps. The blue shoebox was thrown away too. Yeah, probably, but what's the big deal? Kathy looked up at Julia. The blue box was my savings for the apartment I was going to give Alex. The words had an incredible effect. Julia stunned pale. She opened and closed her mouth a couple times to say something, then powerlessly sank down on the steps next to Kathy. Why didn't you warn me? She almost whispered. Kathy was pleased with the effect of the phrase. She didn't keep the money in any blue shoebox. It was lying quietly in her account. But Julia had to teach her a lesson for all those naughty things, which she did to both her and Alex. How did I know you'd decide to throw my stuff out of the house? I had no idea. The older woman stubbornly played the role of a confused and bewildered old lady. Julia shook her head as if she had woken up from a dream. Her eyes lit up with eagerness for action. You will tell me everything in detail now. What the box looked like. What shade of blue, was it big or small? Questions poured out of her sister-in-law like a cornucopia of questions. Kathy answered, trying not to get confused in her statement. The situation was beginning to get her down. Alex had stayed home all this time, never even poked his nose out on the porch. Probably he was ashamed of the fact that he had gone along with his wife and kicked his mother out of the house. But he couldn't go against his wife either. He loved her too much, which Julia took advantage of. After answering all Julia's questions, Kathy walked to the bus stop. Come on, stay, he mumbled to his sister-in-law. She now needed her mother-in-law to help her in her search. The young woman was determined to find the box, even in a landfill, even at the end of the world. And Kathy could help her find it. She knew what a huge amount of money looked like. Why would she? Kathy was a little surprised. What do you mean? Why should we? Now we have to look for the box of money together. You do care about your savings. Is that what it is? Kathy smiled. That's where you're wrong. I don't care what happens to that money. I was going to give it to you anyway. If you find it, take it. Kathy walked down the street and felt Julia's eyes on her. Her sister-in-law was shocked that she had thrown away so much money with her own hands. Yes, but now she'll be digging her nose into the ground just to bring that wealth home. Greedy Julia doesn't realize that Kathy's money is in a bank account. Her mother-in-law is not so dumb as to keep such funds in a box. Before heading to the bus stop, Kathy stopped by Jenna's neighbor's house. She'd been friends with her mother once, good friends. But now she was gone, unfortunately. Kathy still had a good relationship with Jenna. She needed someone in the village, someone who would tell her what was going on, keep an eye on Julia. And Jenna was the perfect informant. The woman had been outraged at first, listening to Kathy's story. She couldn't get her head around it. How could she do such a thing to a man who had let his daughter-in-law and son into the house when they were in a difficult situation? And then, recognizing it all the way through, Jenna laughed loudly and merrily. But Tamar, you guys, you've got to rub her nose in it like that. You figured it out. I'd like to know how they're doing. Kathy smiled. How are they living? How's the search going? Something tells me this story will open Alex's eyes to his wife. Oh, Alex shook her head, Jenna. I didn't think he'd be so weak-willed. Love is evil, Kathy sighed. Jenna had hit a sore spot in her heart. Of course I'll keep an eye on them. I'll get my Petya on board too. You know how quick he is? Peter. Jenna's son just turned 14. The kid's been using his phone to shoot content for his channel. And Peter seemed to be getting good at it. When Kathy was done with her chores, she went to her sisters. Christina would not leave her, would listen to her, support her, pity her. It was good to have such a person. Since the evening of Kathy's return from the resort, it's been 2 weeks. It's not a long time, really. But in that time, a lot had happened. First of all, Kathy's plan had worked. Julia was hooked. She found out where they take the garbage from their village. She found the dump, and now she went there every day as if to work. The girl was not employed anywhere and had plenty of free time, and Julia's trips to the dump were regularly reported to Kathy by phone by Jenna. She proved to be an excellent contact. Oh, Aunt Kathy. What a circus. She goes to the bus stop first thing in the morning. She's like a tourist. She's got a huge rucksack on her shoulders, overalls, gloves, bags. Everything is serious. And in the evening, she comes back tired, shot, angry. She smells like a motherfucker. Animals scatter. People cringe. It's like a circus. Tales of Julia's adventures don't stop there. Peter, Jenna's son, sometimes followed Julia, rode with the boys on bikes to the dump, and filmed videos of the young woman stubbornly digging through mountains of garbage. Kathy watched these videos on Channel 5. Julia scrupulously combed through the dump day after day without missing a square meter. It looked comical, of course. But Kathy was already feeling a little sorry for her almost ex-sister-in-law. Alex had filed for divorce. First, Kathy learned from the neighbors that Alex had left home. Then the son called his mother, apologized himself, repented, and at the same time informed her that he was divorcing Julia. She had turned her back after all, and him away with her obsession, money, boorishness, greed. We're getting a divorce, Mom. I can't stand her anymore. She must be crazy. Julia, let her stay at our house for a while. I gave her a week because she has nowhere to go. Julia keeps hoping to find money. It's become an obsession for her. She blames herself for not looking in the boxes I threw out. Eating on her own. She blames me too. It's unbearable. What are you going to do in the city? I finally found a good job with a place to live, which is important. But I'll have to travel a lot. But I don't care. But the money's good. After talking to my son, Kathy felt better. It is so important to be in touch with a loved one. Now between her and Alex, there are no conflicts and misunderstandings. And Alex's life seems to be getting better. He found a job from Julia, who used him openly, and is leaving. Maybe soon he will meet a good girl and will be happy in his personal life again. What are his years? Relationship with Julia will obviously be a good lesson for Alex. He won't fall into such a net again. At least Kathy really hoped so. The nicest thing happened in Kathy's life the day after she arrived at her sister's house. Christina, of course, had taken her in. They had a spare room in their apartment. Live as long as you like, Sis hugged Kathy. I'd be happy to move in forever. Kathy went to bed all upset. She still had no idea how she was going to live her life. In the morning, she got a call from William. The same casual acquaintance, so enchanted that the woman at the resort. He said that he couldn't forget their meeting, that he thought of Kathy all the time. Dreams of seeing her again. It was incredible. William. Kathy had never imagined that such a man would actually fall in love with her. But it seems that he did. William called and wrote often. They talked a lot, and gradually they became close, like relatives. Distant, yes. But still Kathy felt that this communication was necessary for both of them. William expressed a desire to come to Kathy, but she suggested another option more pleasant. Kathy would fly to him herself because the atmosphere of a resort and a lush old country town are, as they say, two big differences. Kathy had the money for the trip that she had saved for her son's apartment. Alex, he earns his own money. Kathy has only one life, and one should enjoy every moment of it. The woman realized this when she retired, but better late than never. In general, Kathy was going on a long journey, went shopping with anyone, bought beautiful things, and felt really happy. True, she had one more thing to do before she left, not very pleasant, but urgent. A conversation with Julia. She'd had enough of being queen of the dump. Let her start a new life too.
Subscribe and click the bell.
I took care of your disabled father for 10 years, and now that he is gone, he decided to get rid of me like a piece of junk. The woman's outrage was unparalleled. I gave up my favorite job, postponed the birth of our children, and all for your sake, so that you could continue to advance in your career, and you, scoundrel, found another. Not only that, but she has a child with you. Claire grabbed her purse and ran out of the apartment. Claire and Jordan had been married for 10 years. They met at a college party and never separated again. I'll pick you up tomorrow. The first night they met, Jordan said boldly, "Yeah, come by." Claire readily agreed. Every morning a whistle sounded under her window, followed by a not too loud whistle. "Claire, the carriage is here." Looking up to Claire's window on the 5th floor, Jordan was already standing below, with a briefcase under his armpit. Just then, Claire's black head, with its wavy curls, appeared in the open flame and her usual, now Jordan." 3 minutes later, Claire would jump out of the doorway, and the long Jordan would take another briefcase, a girl's briefcase, under her armpit. They returned from class together, too. 6 months of meetings were enough for them to realize that they were made for each other. "Where are you going, to the library?" Claire asked her cheerful classmate. "Yeah, you." "Are you going there, too?" And the young people walked together. "Shall we go to the movies?" suggested Jordan, and I was just dreaming of a new movie. Claire was excited. Movies, books, and music, they liked the same things, or almost the same things. Even in the student cafeteria, everything was resolved to the advantage of both of them. He loved the crumb of bread, she the crusts, and by ordering the vinaigrette, Claire always knew that the peas, which she couldn't stand, would be sparingly eaten by Jordan. "Just look at these misers. It's a natural plushkin with a box. They have every trip to the canteen so profitable." Their buddies laughed, pointing their fingers at the couple. Even with the current abundance of everything in the stores, it was not difficult. Christopher, his son and daughter-in-law, did all his errands perfectly. He was content, although he was very sad after the sudden death of his wife 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He had grown fond of the cheerful, troublesome daughter-in-law. "Claire, you look so much like Jordan, Mama," he told her often. "Just as troublesome and never angry. And my Betty, she was just as easygoing." Claire would rush to hug a sad Christopher. Come on now. Come on, it's all right, we're here." The elderly man tried to discreetly wipe away involuntary tears, and soon got used to the lightning visits of Claire, who, whirlwind carried around his small apartment, immediately put it in order. "Christopher," she shouted from his bedroom, "do you want that old shabby chair? Why don't we throw it away, and Jordan will bring you a new one tomorrow? Christopher instantly forgot about the sadness and ran as hard as he could to save his favorite chair, as old and dilapidated as he was. Next time, as soon as her father-in-law's mood became sad, she again found something just as precious and frightened him with the expulsion of the precious object to the garbage. The father-in-law piously believed that his daughter-in-law's efforts were caused solely by her love of order and new things. He didn't realize how Claire was laughingly telling her husband in the evening, "Do you know how she scared Daddy today? He's sitting there looking at an old picture, you know. Remember your mom? Oh, him again. He was upset. You know, he loved Mom very much." "Yeah, I know." Claire stopped him. "I wanted to distract him. I frightened him with the chair that time, and today I threatened to throw away the antique clock, the one that doesn't work, and my father was so angry with me before I left. Young people nowadays don't understand anything about good things. Young people just want to spend money, and the chair will last 100 years. Oh, he can do that." He smiled at Jordan. "I can imagine how many hours he grumbled when you left." "Let him." Claire waved her hand lightly. "At least he didn't sit around crying and crying. A little stress improves his vitality, but dinner must have calmed him down," said Jordan, leaning back in his chair and stroking his stomach. "You've never cooked as good as you did tonight, Claire." Satisfied Claire smiled contentedly and immediately commanded, "I didn't cook for nothing. I was counting on your help. The dishes are yours. Get to the sink now, come on." Of course, it was purely symbolic labor, washing dishes after a delicious dinner, but my wife was pleased. She was spinning around, serving, then a fork, then a spoon, then wiping everything washed clean and putting it in its place. Not work, but pure pleasure, the continuation of communication, all the more joyful that now the couple did not see each other during the day. Claire came home early from her work, so that she took care of her father-in-law more and more often. Everything flowed smoothly until one day Claire was interrupted from work by a call from Jordan. "Claire." He was almost shouting into the phone. "Dad's having a stroke. My neighbor Clara called me. She's already called an ambulance, but I can't leave. I have a meeting with the Chinese in 10 minutes, you know. I'll be right there. I'll be right there." Claire got right to the point. "I'm on my way. I'll call you later." And she was already rushing down the corridor to warn her superiors, putting on her coat and forgetting about her boots. And so she arrived at the hospital. Only getting out of the cab, she saw that she would have to walk through the puddles in her shoes. Confused, she stood by the car, not knowing where to go. "I'm sorry." The cab driver waved his hands. "You can't go any further. You see the barrier?" Claire looked at him uncomprehendingly and silently walked forward, looking for the main entrance with her eyes. She was in a hurry, as if something depended on her there, in the ward where Christopher was. Only at the emergency room did Claire realize that she would not be allowed into any room. Stroke patients were taken to the intensive care unit while it was still possible to prevent major complications from the stroke. There was no way anyone would be allowed in. The confused Claire, holding her coat in her hands, stood at the door to the intensive care unit for so long that the nurses and orderlies who ran by began to squint at her. Finally, one of them, touched by Claire's lost look, stopped and asked, "What are you waiting for, woman? We have Father here," and began to explain that she and her husband were at work, that they had been told about the intensive care unit, and that she didn't know what to do. "What is the name of the patient?" With a brief nod, the nurse left, and soon the doctor, a tall, stern brunette, came out of the ward. "Well, who's here?" She said her father-in-law's name, although there was only one Claire in the hallway. Me, how is he?" Is he alive? Claire bailed. He's alive if he's here. The doctor replied in a low voice. What are you, his daughter? A daughter-in-law, but still a daughter. Claire said hurriedly, as if something depended on her words. Your father suffered an ischemic stroke, and he's still in serious condition. Leave your phone number so I can contact you at any time. Could it get any worse? Claire was scared. Anything can happen in this life. The patient is stable. He's conscious. We need your phone number so that we can call you when we move him to a regular ward. He will need constant care. He is a bedridden patient. What do I need to do? What should I prepare? Claire was worried all over again. Here's a list of things to take with you to the hospital. The doctor pointed to a poster. Excuse me, I have a lot of work to do. Goodbye. Goodbye. A bewildered Claire lowered her arms, then suddenly realized. Oh, thank you very much, doctor. Have a good day. The doctor was already closing the door behind her, but Claire had time to see a long row of catalogs on which lay men and women. As far as Claire could make out, covered only by sheets, next to them, like cranes on long legs, were racks of IVs. Where are you, Christopher? She tried to look out for Claire, but the door slammed shut in a second, a click sounding. Claire was already on the phone, the worried husband. Claire, where are you? What have you got? Did you make it? The stream of questions seemed never-ending. Finally, Jordan stopped talking and Claire was able to answer. Yes, Jordan, I'm at the hospital. Christopher's in intensive care. They won't let me see him. He's in stable condition. I talked to the doctor, but Dad's conscious. What about him? Are you sure it's a stroke? Is there any hope he'll recover? I was worried on the other end of the line. Yes, as soon as the injections work and he feels better, he'll be moved to a room. I'll be right there. Wait for me, Claire. Stay there. Just where is it? She explained where it was and added, only you can't go through the grounds. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance to the hospital courtyard on the square side. In 10 minutes, she was already sitting in a warm, cozy car and once again detailed everything again. And as soon as he is transferred to a regular ward, someone must be with him all the time because there is not enough staff to take care of every stroke patient. We don't know what condition he's in yet. For the time being, in any case, there will be bed rest, feeding, washing. The nannies can't manage it all. Claire, you realize I can't quit my job, right? I just signed a contract with the Chinese partners. I just need to be on site. Jordan was upset. Claire already realized what was about to come out of her husband's mouth. But this is the men's room. Jordan, how will I be there? I don't know. Jordan was confused. Why don't you call and find out? Do it in the morning, honey, and you'll do a better job. You've always been in touch with Daddy. You know roughly what he needs and how to treat him, don't you? When a sudden disaster strikes, people start looking for a way out. There is always someone they know who has already experienced the same or similar in their lives. So it happened with Claire. Coming to work in the morning, she saw the sympathetic looks of her colleagues, began to ask questions. Oh, Claire, how are you doing? How's your father-in-law? Alive, I hope. How are you? How's Christopher? The questions came one after another. All 5 women, sitting in the same office, had become friends and were aware of each other's family affairs. It turned out that the oldest of them, Doris, had once cared for a paralyzed aunt, and Lara, who had just joined the team, also had experience with her grandmother, who had suffered a stroke, but relatively mild. The first thing to do is to ask the doctor about painkillers. Doris stated, at first their pain is severe. It prevents them from starting exercises and workouts. Massage should be done lightly to relax the paralyzed side. Oh, girls, Claire begged. Thank you, but can I ask you to explain it all over again? Yes, of course, Doris and Lyra said almost in unison. I haven't seen him. I don't know anything about his condition. By the time I get there, I'll have forgotten everything you told me. Well, we're always in touch, Claire. Lyra reassured her. They'll tell you everything. Every sick person is looked after by someone, a wife or a daughter. Yes, Claire was surprised. I was afraid it was a men's ward. Yes, it is now. Doris even laughed. Men don't go in such places, my dear. You have to save your strength, and it's a woman's job to clean up the dirt and carry the pots out. What's it to them, heroes? They won't trifle. They'll run away in half an hour. Claire was a little hurt by the woman's words, but they were true. At least Jordan could also take at least a week's vacation, so what if they were Chinese? Surely they are not more important than his own father. There was some truth in Doris's words. There was no escaping it. She called the hospital in the afternoon, and they reassured her that it was still a short time, but that the patient's condition was normal after such a blow. If everything goes according to plan, then tomorrow perhaps will be transferred to a regular ward. Having calmed down a little, Claire finished the day's work, but just in case she arranged for a vacation. The boss was understanding, but only asked her to warn the girls in the department. Claire, you always help your colleagues. Make sure that this time they are always ready to cover for you and keep the department on top of things. I will, Claire replied confidently. Our girls are great, they understand. She spent the whole day explaining things to Lara. It was supposed that she would substitute for those who had gone on vacation for the first time, which would be convenient for everyone, and at the same time, she would get into the flow faster and learn different types of operations. At the same time, Claire, for some reason, could not get Doris' words about men out of her head. Walking home from work, through the quiet evening streets, she decided to put an end to this moving tangle of unpleasant feelings. At dinner at home, she looked straight into Jordan's eyes and asked, Jordan, you love your father, don't you? Why don't you at least try, yourself, to take a few days to be near him? He'd be glad. I'd love to. Jordan answered hotly, but as I explained to you, this is the time when things are going to get busy. If we miss the moment, someone without me will screw up, and then goodbye, foreign partners. Claire seemed to calm down. But you know, I'm actually sure that Dad will be quite comfortable with you, and that's important in his condition. Jordan continued as if, unlike Claire, he knew his father's condition much more than she did. Honey, you see we could hire a nurse, but she'd be a complete stranger, and I want Dad to be with just us. We. Claire was again struck by the inappropriateness of that pronoun after the sentences her husband had just uttered. Well, obviously, I can't be around him all the time. I have a job, but I'll stop by as often as I can to buy whatever he and you need. Please, Claire, will you do it? What's your job worth to you? It's a nerve-wracking job, and here you're busy and at home and everything. But I can't be torn between two houses. And who's going to feed you? Clean the house, cook your things. Claire, really, I'm not without a hand, and I'm 2 years old. The woman, a little hesitated, agreed, and from the next day, began her new duties. Christopher was indeed transferred to the ward the day after tomorrow. Having arrived with a large bag of what she considered necessary, Claire saw that her father-in-law was already lying on a high special bed. His eyes were closed, the skin on his face and hands glowing with dead poverty. A fat, small nurse showed Claire the duck, toilet, and bath, explained the daily routine in a businesslike manner, and fled. The three women who were here, some with their husbands, some with their brothers or sons, looked at Claire with curiosity and sympathy. The neighbors helped her identify things, getting to know each other little by little. Meanwhile, Christopher opened his eyes and wheezed something. He was begging for a drink. The neighbor realized. She immediately took the drinker and showed Claire how to handle it. Lifting the old man's head, she tried as carefully as possible to give him a drink, but the water poured past him. The father-in-law groaned unhappily. "Jordan?" he whispered, almost wheezed. "He's at work, Christopher." He'll come. He couldn't yet. He's got foreigners there." Claire reassured the old man. "Don't worry, I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, they both adjusted to life in the hospital. It wasn't easy. Christopher, who had always been characterized by intelligence and patience, suddenly became tearful, could get cranky. "No, I won't have porridge. I can't swallow it," and he would sharply push the plate away with his healthy hand. Fortunately, he was affected by the side of the brain that does not affect speech. Intelligence didn't seem to be affected either. Only by comparing her previous interactions with the man did she realize the damage the disease had done to a man she respected. She already knew there would be outbursts of anger, groans of muscle pain, and even delirium at night. The old man, in his position, no longer had to think about shyness, since her father-in-law could not support himself, and little by little he developed the kind of trusting relationship with Claire that only a child has with its mother or nanny. All of this Claire endured. 3 weeks of treatment in the nightmarish conditions of a city hospital, with poor provision, finally came to an end. Claire said goodbye to her kind neighbors. By then a new shift of patients and caregivers had partially entered the ward. Christopher, so cordial and polite before, barely looked at his neighbors in the ward. He was all wrapped up in the cocoon of his own illness. Claire was a good thing. The ward is calm, even if a little depressed, and there is a complete change in his and Christopher's life. "Jordan, I ordered a pass to the territory. You drive up, right to the entrance." In the tone of an expert dispatcher, the command was to her husband on the morning of their discharge. Jordan came to pick them up in a large, comfortable car. In his arms, he carried his father from the hospital gurney into the salon. At home in the apartment had to go up only to the 2nd floor. Now Claire was with her sick father-in-law. Just gradually Claire's life returned to normal. True, now she could not find a job in her specialty, but Jordan consoled her again. "Get some rest. You need it now. Look at the weight you've lost, Claire. Get strong. Do whatever you want. I'll make sure you don't deny yourself anything. Let's see what it's like to be a housewife." Claire smiled sadly. In her new position, she found a silver lining. She read a lot, watched movies, decorated her and Jordan's cozy apartment. It turned out that things at home never end. The more you do, the more new things arise. Even at her father-in-law's, constantly obeying the wishes of the sick, she was not so busy. Now, however, it was a very welcome, spiritualized business, the troubles and joy. Having completed a small renovation of her somewhat neglected, over the years apartment, Claire was going to take care of her own health. The young woman decided to undergo an examination in the clinic and prepare for long-postponed motherhood. She had long dreamed of having children, and now her husband would have no excuses. Claire discovered that right next to their home, a new clinic opened, quite impressive looking. The flow of patients to this clinic did not expire, which inspired her faith in the reliability and professionalism of the doctors working there. She quickly found the clinic's website on the internet and called the number and made an appointment with the doctor. The doctor, by all accounts, was a good one. The walls of her offices in the paid clinic were full of all kinds of diplomas and diplomas. Having carefully examined Claire, the doctor said to her, "I rarely see healthy women, to tell you the truth. I don't see any health problems with you, so you can get dressed." Continuing to take notes, she pronounced, "Still, don't delay getting pregnant. After all, 32 years old, even by today's standards. Actually, that's what we were planning," lied Claire, expressing her dream. "The longer you think about planning, the harder it will be for you to carry a baby. The clock is ticking," smiled the gynecologist. She thanked for the recommendations and left the doctor's office. At last she felt light and calm. After a rainy, cold summer, the weather was great, which is rare in August. It was even hot, and the coolness of the evening was so welcome. The maples glistened with green paws of leaves. The birch trees spread their long strands along the whole alley. It was a shame that such a lovely day would be wasted if it wasn't used for a walk. To breathe in as much fresh air as possible, filled with the fragrance of greenery and flowers. "God, it's beautiful," Claire gasped. No way I will not sit in four walls." The young woman decided to go to Krister's apartment, which had been empty for about a year. It should have been cleaned up long ago. At least some of the unnecessary junk should have been thrown out. Some of the things left behind should have been taken away. From the stop, Claire went not straight ahead, but down the long path. Still unable to escape the gloom, the old apartment from the bright sunshine and clean air. The keys to her father-in-law's apartment she carried with her, a long-standing habit. Opening the door, she took a step inside, but barely entered the hallway. She realized that the dwelling was quite habitable. At that very moment, much to her surprise, a 2-year-old boy came out of the room and stared at her with his little eyes. Just then, apparently his mother came out of the kitchen. She was an attractive woman who was clearly no more than 25 to 24 years old. "Who are you?" Claire asked in astonishment. "And what are you doing here?" "I'm Adriana. This is my son, Noah. We live here." The young woman didn't seem confused at all, but she wasn't surprised at Claire's arrival. "What right do you have to be here?" Claire was even more surprised. "This is my husband's apartment, Jordan, and who are you?" The stranger felt quite in her own right, standing firmly on her feet, and she wasn't going to answer to anyone, even if it was someone who opened the door with her own keys. Apparently, "I'm your husband's wife." She hummed stupidly and walked across the apartment without asking permission. Adriana, taking the baby in her arms, followed her everywhere. Claire found many changes in the familiar surroundings of the apartment. Christopher's bed was gone, replaced by a new, wide 4-poster bed. When Claire saw it, she wrinkled her nose. A sexodrome, and what kind of vulgar canopy over it? She was so disgusted to see the apparently shared bed of her husband and his mistress. And now what? Take up the knife, strike, as they say. The wardrobe in the bedroom was new, though inexpensive. Claire knew good things, but this was clearly an attempt to save money. Or had Adriana brought it from her possessions? It didn't matter at all. For some reason, however, Claire clung to every object, to the slightest change in the interior. She noted the beautiful mirror, set in a beautiful frame, and the expensive cosmetics in front of it, on the dressing table. The apartment was quite clean, but there was no sense of style and coziness created by women's hands. It was a little bit of everything. There were heavy purchases, Jordan, as if the furniture was brought directly from the house of Sobakovich Nice. Good value, insignificant trifles obviously belonged to Adriana, and also there was a lot of what was left from the previous owner, Krister Hera. Grounded and ageless, a bookcase with numerous books and albums, a fundamental desk in the hall, or a real wooden closet for clothes in the bedroom. Strangely, this diversity of everything, the diversity of the surroundings, made it easier for Claire to accept her husband's apparent, accomplished, and long-standing adultery. Everything around was so unstable, unfounded, that she simply let the fact pass through her, not taking it to heart, or it was the first fever, the body's defensive reaction to stress. Both women were silent. She walked around the apartment, sat on the couch in the living room. "Is that Jordan's son?" she finally asked, looking at the baby's cute face. "Yes," Adriana answered calmly and evenly. "How long have you been here?" Claire asked. "Since Jordan, we have been here for 5 years," Adriana answered. 5 years? Claire bit her lip. So by the time her husband cheated on her, she had already served 5 years as a sister of mercy under her father, and for the next 5 years, her husband had enjoyed spending time with this girl, was apparently happy with her. She felt either a chill or the sensation of being splashed with ice water. "He always told me to wait a while, that his wife was an invalid, and that's why he couldn't leave her. His wife needed constant care, and who would he be if he left her so helpless, couldn't part with her, pity her?" "Oh, pity?" Claire didn't notice herself grinning ironically. "Where did you meet then?" "At my house," Adriana answered simply. "He kept promising me, saying he'd be free soon, and then we'd be together forever." "How long have you lived here?" For some reason, Claire asked. "It's almost a year since he finally moved me and my son into his apartment," answered the interlocutor still as calmly. "So I'm dead, and now there's nothing stopping you from being together." Claire sneered, unable to resist. "It would appear so. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it wasn't what Jordan said. I love him and I believed what he said." Without any embarrassment, Adriana said. For some reason she had decided that she could tell her husband's wife everything in detail, and that it was even necessary to do so. Serenely patting her son on the back, she looked peacefully at Claire with her small eyes, framed by absolutely cow's lashes, tastelessly augmented, in a medium-sized salon. And she kept talking as if to a friend, retelling the story of her acquaintance with Jordan. "I, myself, am a newcomer. I didn't pass the competition at the institute, so I studied to be a hairdresser. My mother said don't go back to the district, stay here. Her sister has been living here for a long time, my aunt. She's lonely, so she got attached to me. I clean her floors, help her bathe, give her groceries. She feels good. So my aunt tells me, 'You, Adriana, you better finish hairdressing courses and earn money like people. Who need your institutes?' That's right, I thought I'd go and learn. I grasped it on the fly, and now I'm working in a salon, men's hairdresser. Then again, Aunt Cindy made me do it. You don't know anything, Adriana. You need to get married. And where does a decent man always go? At the barber shop." Adriana looked at Claire apprehensively and bit her tongue. But Claire didn't care about her. Slowly, a bitter, soul-cutting truth began to creep in. She sits in a love nest and listens to the story of her husband's mistress. Could she have ever imagined such a thing? Yes, she couldn't have dreamed it. Simplicity is worse than stealing. Claire exhaled, looking at herself, and suddenly realized why she felt so bad. Until then, she had been sitting there without breathing, tense and tense. "What?" Perplexed asked Adriana, and without waiting for an answer continued. "Well, in general, since the hall is male, there are many men every day, but Jordan, he is not like all of them." She looked at Claire again and finally blushed. Claire saw her neck blush. Then pink patterns appeared on her chest. Her whole face turned ugly red too. Claire tried not to look at her. She hated to listen. The revelations to her young rival. "Would you please call him from your number?" she asked, holding back as best she could. Adriana obediently dialed the number, and after a few seconds, Jordan's familiar voice sounded in the receiver. "Yes, Adriana, is something wrong?" Claire took the phone from her hands and spoke. "You're such a jerk, Claire." Jordan's voice sounded confused. "What are you doing in there? How could you? How could you?" "Claire, come home. I'll explain everything to you." Jordan, of course, could not say anything else at the moment. He was simply dumbfounded. "What can you explain to me? That while I was taking care of your sick father, you started a new family, lived a life of pleasure? You're a lowlife, a scumbag, a scum. Do you understand? And I don't want to see you ever." She shoved the phone into the hand of a stunned Adriana and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door. She walked away, tears streaming down her eyes. "Traitor, scoundrel, traitor." Claire mentally scolded her husband. "He has the child, and me. What about me?" Claire had always dreamed of having children from the very first days of her marriage, but she had never been able to get pregnant. Many times she would go to the doctor, but each time Jordan would talk her out of it. And then, while caring for a sick old man, thoughts of having a child of her own left Claire. There was no time for that. Still, in her heart, she hoped that she was not the one to blame for the couple's inability to give birth. Going to the doctor had made her so happy. She believed that all was not lost. But now she has and will have nothing, no family, no children, no job. No one needs her, no one at all, not even herself. If she knew why Jordan's passport had turned so brightly pink, something she hadn't and couldn't tell anyone about, perhaps Adriana's story would have dispelled her a little. Claire, by virtue of her good heart, would even feel a little sorry for this distant girl who had seen nothing good in life. Not distant, but Adriana had become wise beyond her years, and with good reason. Adriana never saw her father and never knew him. Her mother only waved away her daughter's inquiries like an annoying fly and drunkenly said, "Fuck him. Remember him." Adriana's mother was drinking. Not only that, it was absolutely indiscriminate on acquaintance, Galena. She had 3 children by different fathers, and laughing, she told one of her sons, "God knows, Ethan, from whom I gave birth to you, I lived with John, and James was next door, so we came by and mended the porch." And she laughed unabashedly. The daughter was still alone, and her mother seemed to love her more than her sons, called her Adriana, her daughter, and even occasionally bought her a new dress. Of course, when there was money from a drunken suitor, and that didn't happen very often. The boys would not be lost, her mother thought. The army and prison would not let them starve to death. The country needed men. On the outskirts of their village, almost in the middle of nowhere, stood only the high fences of the camp, and many kilometers farther away stood the same settlers' settlements where the released prisoners had settled down. Moors in the settlement were most cruel. The licentiousness of the former prisoners bordered on anarchy, and the hard work in the wilderness, where there is nothing to do but lumbering, left no strength for other pleasures than drinking and debauchery. As usual, 15-year-old Adriana was quickly used by one of her mother's friends, taking advantage of her simplicity and the absence of her mother. Then showed her a knife, not scaring her much. This Adriana was enough to keep quiet. And so they lived until the girl, with sinfulness, graduated from school. The mother's lover went to the girl. As soon as the mother got drunk or went somewhere, even for a short time. Then Adriana was already surprised by the miracle. For 3 years she never got pregnant. Her mother's roommate was a relatively young and seemingly handsome man. Perhaps it was still trying on the girl, with the position of his secret mistress. Sometimes in a good mood, he praised Adriana for dignity, incomparable with the appearance of the mother, who with every drink became a terrible, sprawled-across old woman. Knowing that her mother had a sister in a distant city, Adriana convinced her mother by crying and constant persuasion that she should go there. Her mother wrote a tearful letter to her sister, and her aunt agreed to take her niece in for the first time. The rest of Adriana's story, Claire, was almost true, except for the legend of the institute. What institute? For the uneducated daughter of an alcoholic? The school in the village gave knowledge that was only enough to live in the village. It is true that exiled intellectuals from the capital's universities used to work at this school and even trained a few medalists, but that was so long ago. And those who received these medals left the terrible land as quickly as their teachers, who had finished their term of exile. In short, Adriana had settled into the city quite well. Not bad at all, if you remember where she came from and who she was. Now she was in a pretty prestigious place, and she was going out of her way to please both the customers and the boss. "Come in, please." She stretched her lips in a welcoming way in front of Jordan, who came in for a haircut. "How shall we cut his hair?" "Well, it's up to you." Jordan smiled back. He was happy to see a new face. "You've studied, but I haven't. And you've probably studied more than I have." Adriana frowned modestly. "Engineer or professor?" Jordan laughed at the girl's unsophisticated compliment and asked, "And you are new. Where Claire?" Claire was the name of his regular hairdresser, of a very respectable weight and no less respectable age. "Yes, I've been hired to replace her on a trial basis, and they said I'd see what happens." Claire's retired. "Enough," she says. "Her legs have sprouted pillars by the chair. I'll dig in the vegetable garden and move to a country house. Except for onion shoots, I will not cut anything in my life. That's enough." Adriana laughed merrily. Jordan gave in to her fun and joined in. From the very first meeting, an extraordinary ease settled between them. Not for nothing, apparently, there is an opinion that love is chemistry. This gravitation of two, the desire to connect, and appeared in an instant, as soon as he saw Jordan Adriana. Without thinking, he wanted to see her again, to be closer to her. Then he realized that Adriana reminded him of the young Claire, the same mischievous eyes and dark curls. But that realization came much later, when he realized what a trap he had fallen into the moment he had decided to meet the young hairdresser after work. Adriana is so innocent and youthful, fresh as Jordan thought. Looking at her dark blonde curls and slender figure, she appeared to be very skillful in lovemaking. How was Jordan to know what and how the released prisoner had taught her 3 whole years in the settlement? Having arrived in the city, Adriana did not lead a monastic life either. Before entering the prestigious salon where she met Jordan, she had traveled the thorny path of an apprentice and was building up her hand, which it must be admitted she excelled at. She started out cutting and shaving men in a station barber shop, and what kind of people did not fall to her? One of the occasional customers, a smashing little guy who also came from the province and settled in the city in the auto shop, captivated her heart and became a constant lover. Chuckling, he told her, "You catch the customer by the beard, do you hear? We'll catch a daddy with you, you and the pleasure of it will get. All I will be easier, and even more money from him to make money. And we with you in the summer on his money, and to the sea. You say too." Adriana sulked. I love you alone. Do I need some daddy? Love me. Who won't let you, you fool? Lover laughed happily, and don't let your daddy out of your hands if you get him. And he strong hand rolls the girl on a joint bed. Recently, the couple began to rent a common room. It's economical and convenient. So about a date with Jordan, allegedly on her living space, Adriana lied without blinking an eye. In fact, having become close in an instant, she and Jordan made love right in Claire's apartment. Moreover, in her own bed, knowing that Claire, she would hardly have been able to have such a quiet conversation with Adriana for such a long time. But a decent person usually sees in another a person like herself, and it could not even occur to Claire how far human baseness could extend. After all, she came to her house only briefly while Christopher slept. Sometimes he was under the care of a nurse who, for a small fee, would visit the sick man to give him an IV of medication for support. The treatment lasted about an hour, and longer with a massage. Claire was on the run making dinner. Jordan cleaned up abandoned things, and not once did the thought of what was going on here without her at night creep up on her. Yes, her husband called her often, at each call asking what she and her father should bring. And also when, at what hour she would be, in their shared apartment, it didn't bother her at all. She didn't even pay attention to her husband's unusual meticulousness. On the contrary, it was pleasant his attention, waiting, counting the hours, let's go to my place. I want to treat you to a great coffee. Hiding his eyes, proposed Jordan, Adriana, for the first time, about a week after we met. It was already late evening, and they left the cozy cafe where they had spent several evenings. Kissing and cuddling in the car interior, a grown man and a blossoming woman, did not satisfy. Both wanted to continue. And your wife? Adriana was a little surprised. The rest didn't bother her. That was the way she was. Wife, didn't I tell you? Jordan was a little confused, although he had warned Adriana about being married right away. He would be honest with this nice girl. Adriana immediately made it clear that it was impossible to meet at her place, because she lived at her aunt's place, although perfectly continued to share a room together with her former lover. She intuitively felt what and when to say, when to smile, and when to open up to meet a man. Having acquired an urban appearance, the girl also learned the ability to behave discreetly. She could not be taught to deceive. She did it brilliantly. But to keep silent where necessary, to create an image of a well-bred, well-mannered maiden, this skill had to be learned as best as possible and preferably faster. Adriana was learning. She watched the men. They showed their feelings even more vividly than women. They turned out to be excellent teachers. Say the wrong thing, and the handsome guy would snap like the last skier. A chiseled guy could get a square swear if he got the wrong haircut. Compliment, affectionate smile, worked wonders. Knave men bought them like children. Barbershop became for Adriana a kind of institute of noble maidens. She could portray any gait, any smile, from a simple and naughty girl to a price-conscious beauty, expanded her art of reincarnation. Of course, these charms applied only to men, and any woman could immediately recognize Adriana in 5 minutes. But men were coming, and for 5-minute seduction, fuse, and talent, Adriana had enough. Fascinated by Adriana's youth and the novelty of his own position, free, in love, Jordan, as if plowing in weightlessness, but had to decide what to do next. And so he decided. My wife is an invalid, he said, and after a satisfied look at the girl's surprised face, he continued, I periodically put her in the hospital to heal, but pity her, she is also a person. I could not praise myself. What a good boy. Now he wouldn't have to explain to Adriana why there were women's things in his apartment. At the same time, he made a deposit for future meetings with her. The base is a word. Adriana, not suspecting that decent-looking men, too, can lie, easily accepted his proposal and surprised Jordan, liberation and temperament, their first night together. The next day, the ardent lover could think of nothing else but another night, and Adriana again behaved with complete freedom, and he was easy and simple with her. And Claire, what of Claire? She hadn't bothered him in a long time. Talking only about diapers and medications and a new bedsores mattress, anyone's feelings would fade, and he's a living man. He's a man, after all, a successful one, by the way. There was not a single decent acquaintance of his who did not have a permanent mistress, and now it was his turn too. He could afford an expensive beauty, but he liked this cute hairdresser, although it would be better without this job in the service industry, of course. Somehow it is not prestigious. After a couple months of lovemaking, he decided that he didn't have to show Adriana to anyone, but if anything, he wouldn't be ashamed to pass with her. Acquaintances will only smack, looking at the lush forms of his girlfriend. But to confess that your mistress works in a beauty salon, haircuts, and shaves other men, it is somehow not comical. Adriana, you should quit that job, he said, resting after the raucous entertainment. Adriana lifted her dark head from his shoulder and looked into his eyes. When are we to be married? Jordan, strangely enough, was not ready for marriage with a live wife, so he took the conversation aside. Adriana, soon I'll rent you an apartment, so we'll be there. We'll see each other more easily and freely. And my wife, she's not a bad person, she suffers. Poor thing. I try to create all conditions for her, of course, but the disease, it progresses. I'd be an asshole if I left her now. You'd be the first to judge me, darling. And he rushed to kiss Adriana, showering her with compliments, and Adriana laughed again, forgetting her purpose. Adriana could wait a long time, but here she was not forced to do anything. After seeing Jordan off, she pulled the curtain on the window, a sign to her roommate that the entrance to her apartment was available. He had moved out immediately from the old small apartment to this one, rented for Adriana by Jordan, and the presence of men's things. Adriana easily explained to Jordan that her brother, a student, often visited her on weekends. She couldn't deny him a vacation and a full meal at her sister's house, could she? Jordan's free weekends suited him just fine, and he easily took on his brother's version of the story. His father and Claire were eagerly awaiting him on Saturday and Sunday, too. While Jordan was with his father, Claire would get at least a few hours of freedom to clean up, socialize with her friends, at least go to the sauna after all. It turned out that everything worked out marvelously well for everyone. Everything settled down. Adriana finally quit her job. Jordan gave her enough money to support her young lover, but he still decided to keep his job. 2 years into her relationship with Jordan, Adriana suddenly found herself pregnant. She thought that her body was now rested after the stress. She didn't have to live in constant tension, so she was able to conceive. Wow, a kinder was made. Her roommate laughed, neither surprised nor pleased. But you, Adriana, don't count on me. I'm a shitty father. I have such a kinder, probably all over the country is full of running. So come on, make your daddy happy. He needs an hair. I was just on my way to a construction site. A friend of mine wants me to go. The man, very far from thinking about the family nest, quickly packed his things and drove off in an unknown direction. Most likely not that far away, just to avoid Adriana's eyes. The confused Adriana cried for a long time, abandoned by her constant lover, with whom she had long since gotten over. Jordan arrived, saw her swollen face, and rushed to embrace her. "Adriana, what are you doing? Who's hurt you?" "No one." Adriana sobbed. "I'm pregnant." "Oh, what a trouble you're in." Jordan laughed. "It's wonderful. You'll give birth to a beauty like you." Until now, Jordan had never suspected that the news that he would soon become a father would make him happy. For so many years, he had avoided persistent conversations with Claire about the future birth of a child. Why he had avoided parenthood, Jordan himself could not answer. Not ready, that would be the truth. And here he himself did not understand why, out of a desire to appease his mistress, the acceptance of this unknown infant was suddenly born. With every visit to Adriana, this acceptance grew stronger, and now he himself did not understand why he so desperately refused future fatherhood, living with Claire. Incidentally, it must be said that he continued to have a wonderful relationship with Claire. He showed touch and care for his wife, but there had been no intimacy between them for a long time. Claire, a proud and self-sufficient woman, did not touch the subject out of delicacy. There was no need for tenderness. Christopher was dying. He was already 40 days old. Claire had long lived at home, and the couple continued to live as brother and sister. Returning from the gynecologist, Claire was just about to gather the mental strength to decide to have the most important conversation with her husband for the future of their family. It began to rain, but she, as if without noticing it, took among some half-abandoned cottages, not thinking at all about where she was going. The phone in her bag rang insistently, but she paid no attention to it. Only feeling deadly tired, the woman looked around, saw an old bench under a tree, sat down, leaned her head against the rough table, and closed her eyes. At that time, a white-haired little boy was running along the sidewalk, slapping on the puddles, enjoying the splashes that flew from under his bare feet. He tried to run exactly in the middle of the small puddles that had managed to form from the rain, and now they glistened under the light of the lantern. He squealed and laughed joyfully when the splashing water hit his face and carelessly licked the muddy drops off his lips. It was Adam, a 3-year-old little boy who had run away from his loving grandmother, and his great joy from an independent walk. There was no limit. "Adam, I'm in trouble with you," shouted the old lady, trying to catch up with her grandson and not keeping up with him. "Where are you going on the puddles? Stop. I say, you'll catch cold, and you'll have to take care of yourself. Oh, you are my bitter little sorrow." Finally, she managed to pick up the baby, but she immediately let him go, shrieking from the pain that shot through her lower back. She turned to look around for a bench, and only then saw a woman sitting on a bench under a tree. The old woman shuddered fearfully. "Lord, your power! What is it?" The little boy in his grandmother's arms also quieted down when he saw the stranger, and with some fear looked at the pale face of the sitting woman. "Is she alive?" The old woman muttered, slowly approaching the bench. Then she stepped toward Claire and touched her with her hand. "Whose are you going to be, girl? Why are you sitting out here in the rain? What's the matter with you?" Claire opened her eyes. "Don't worry, I'll be right out. I just got lost here by accident. Where would you go in this darkness?" The old woman looked around worriedly. "Well, let's go to my place. It's my house over there." Lifting Claire by the elbow, she continued to speak softly. "I live with my grandson. Is my name Margaret? And this is Adam." The frightened boy looked out from behind Margaret's back. Claire followed the friendly old woman. She had no strength, and she would certainly not have made it home on her own. The place was remote. The phone was dead. There were no cars or cabs around. It was a completely unfamiliar suburb, where she had never been in her life. Soon enough they came to an old 2-story house, probably from the time of the first builders. They went up to the second floor and entered a small apartment. Margaret put the kettle on and took her grandson into the bathroom. "I'll only be 5 minutes, darling," she said to Claire. "Otherwise, God forbid he gets sick, I'll warm the child." She quickly bathed Adam in a hot bath and brought him to the kitchen. "Now for some hot tea." After Adam, she also went to the bath and cleaned herself up. The hot shower made her feel better, and she was able to answer Margaret's questions. "I, Margaret, learned a terrible thing today," she began quietly. "I have no husband, no child, no family." "Oh, no," the new acquaintance groaned. "Are they dead?" "No, my husband is alive, even happy. He abandoned me, Margaret, and abandoned me a long time ago, and I was a fool. I lived quietly and trusted the scoundrel." Wanting to talk, the woman told about herself, not hiding any details from the old woman. "Why did he do that?" "I did everything for him, loved, cared, and what happened? I took care of his father for 10 years, and during that time he betrayed me, cheated on me." "How can you do that? And the most frustrating thing is that I'm 32 years old and I don't have children. I do not even imagine whether I can even think about men. I dream about a child. 10 years I lived next to my dying father-in-law, and I thought only about a baby. While I look for a new husband, my time will be up." Claire grinned bitterly and sipped the cooled tea. Renewing the brew, the women began the tea party anew. The hostess remembered the forgotten cutlets and warmed them for her new friend. "You probably haven't eaten anything since this morning. Here, eat this, you'll feel better." Everything seems bad to a hungry person, but on a full stomach it's no trouble at all. Claire only now remembered that in the morning before going to the doctor, she had not eaten anything, thinking that she would have to take tests. Poppy seed in her mouth since last night. She feels completely drained. At first through force, living through a juicy morsel, she gradually got into the flavor. The meat was fragrant with garlic and onions, and with hot tea, Claire ate 3 cutlets and turned a little pink. Margaret began to comfort Claire, and Adam and I, too, were left alone. There are not only men who are unfaithful, there are also enough butterflies among women that fly from flower to flower. They're all looking for the best and the sweetest. Did Adam's mom leave him? Claire guessed. She's beautiful. Why would she bother with a child? She'd rather spread her beauty around the world, live for herself. And that's how deceptive appearances can be, Claire. Was she really beautiful? She took an interest in this family. The son came. "Mom, I'm getting married. Here's the bride." Well, I look at her. She looks like a daughter-in-law, a nice girl, lovely to look at. She's tall, straight, looks into the eyes, looks cheerful, and has curls. Now this miracle is made with her own hands, so she knows how to do something, also good. I guess you can't drink water off a face, of course, but my Harry is worth every beauty. It's not good for a mother to praise her child, but my son, he looks like a hero from a picture. He took after my father, and our father was a man to all men. It's all right that he's found a match. God willing, they'll get along happily. Get married. I say the young years are passing. Why grow old alone? Let's have a family. Together you'll look for what you want and build it. I blessed my son. We summoned the guests, celebrated honorably, everything as it should be. Right after the wedding, my daughter-in-law got pregnant and gave birth to Adam. And now, not like before, the little one needs diapers and food, not like nowadays. He doesn't suck a tit, and his food is very expensive, they say, so he started to run out of money. Margaret told how the money shortage started, how she tried to save money and diversify at least the food of the young. She got Piglet, worked from morning till evening on a small vegetable garden, made rolls so that the harvest would not go to waste. But of course it was not enough, and the young wife sat at home more, not helping with the household in any way. She always had an excuse. She had a stomachache. Adam did not let her sleep at night. Adam was capricious. Margaret put up with it too, as long as the child was looked after. But Harry would not spoil her mood because her son tries, works, takes overtime when he can. So we stretched as hard as we could, but we got tired. That's what I'm telling you, Claire. Harry came home from work one day and said he was leaving the workshops. Turns out a friend of his from the army had written him a letter. He didn't write often, but this was just in time. He's been on a business trip for a long time, and he calls Harry to him. He writes to us that we need such people very much. You're not a drinker, handy and ahead, all sorts of tasks, like nuts. He wants Harry to work with him because his partner moved to the south and gave up business trips. He needs to be treated in the sea air, so my Harry has decided he's going to work on a rotational basis. What about your sister-in-law? Did she agree? Claire asked. How could she not? She loved money, that she will buy on joy. Everything. She liked to dress up a lot, but my grandson was dressed up like a Tsarevich. I kept scolding them, don't spoil the boy like that. He doesn't understand anything yet, and they put new expensive clothes on him every day. They wash them, so he doesn't have time to put them on a second time, as everything is already too small. He grows by leaps and bounds, but life has gotten better, hasn't it? Claire either asked or confirmed. Oh, Claire, on the outside, everything is peaceful. Money seems to have improved, but what's inside a man, you can't see at once. The wife turned out to be a troublemaker. She strayed when Adam was not even a year old. I didn't say a word when I noticed the affair. Harry came to visit. We had a goodbye, he went away, but she's so fussy about it. She's been trying all sorts of ways to get out of the house to deceive me. And she attacked the wrong one. I waited for her until she came back late, smelling of wine. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wandering. Come on, sister-in-law, I told her, sit down next to me and let's talk. Where have you been? Who were you out with? Don't lie to me. I've seen your sister. I'm a woman myself. I know at a glance who breeds what. Well, Claire got excited. So she sat down, her eyes down to the floor, playing the innocent, but she kept silent, and I kept silent. We were sitting like that, and suddenly she started crying. Excuse me, she's crying, Mommy. She called me Mom. She lost her mother long ago. And you? Interest, Claire in the lives of complete strangers, was growing. What about me? My business is old, I told her so. It's not me I'm telling you to live with, sweetheart. You have a husband. And if you think about it, you have a son too. Will you sit like that in front of them? How will you look into their eyes? She cried, and they went to bed. And I didn't sleep all night. I had no peace. And in the morning I fell asleep, so soundly that I didn't hear anything. Only when Adam woke up and began to grunt, I jumped up to him. I looked, and my sister-in-law's bed was empty, and the bed was tidied up neatly as before the guests. I looked in the closet, and there was not a single dress. All I immediately realized, she ran away with her boyfriend, unknown to what distant lands, and she did not take any money. Unless she had a separate amount with her, but I know nothing about that, but I do not have time to sit and cry. So I dressed up my grandson and fed him, took him for a walk and sang songs. That's all. Did you even write or call afterwards?" Her only listener was worried. "No, Claire, I waited. I think she is a mother, such a wonderful boy, how not to love and miss him?" But no, not once, not a single word. So she hasn't been around since. She has, of course she has. You can't go far without money, and that man doesn't need her without money. My sister-in-law came back 2 weeks later. Harry hadn't even gotten back from his business trip yet. Adam and I are walking from the store with a heavy grocery bag in one hand and my grandson in the other, and near the entrance, Mother of God. My daughter-in-law is sitting there. Adam shouted, "Mom, Mom," but she and cry and hug my son. She almost falls on her knees in front of me again. There are a lot of unkind eyes around. Everyone is curious about what's going on in the neighborhood. But I picked up the bride and took her home. What to be ashamed in front of people? And she, poor thing, continues to wail about her misfortune. "What shall I do, Mother?" she says. "How can I go on? She won't forgive me, Harry, and neither will you." And Adam, he cuddled up to his mother, hugging her, saying his own things to her. And I felt sorry for the poor head. He grew up without a mother. Who would teach him life? A mother to a child, whatever she is. Don't make another orphan out of Adam. Let them raise their own child if they've given birth. How could she? Claire was indignant to abandon such a lovely boy. And that's my sweetheart. She must have been a breed. She'd live like a human being, and then she'd do something nasty. So we agreed that we wouldn't say anything to Harry, and we'd start our lives all over again, as if she'd never done anything wrong. It's not uncommon for young people to have disagreements and quarrels between husband and wife. But as they embrace and sleep in the same bed for a night, all the past will be forgotten and there will be peace and tranquility in the house again. Didn't it work out that way for them? Claire asked. I don't know. Harry was making good money. I tried to help everyone. Kelly, that's my daughter-in-law, tried not to spend too much money, so they decided to separate. At least a little, but to have their own place. They moved from me to a one-room apartment, and to pay for it took, as it is called now, a big loan for housing exactly. A mortgage? That's what Claire said. That's the one. Margaret rejoiced, a forgotten word. They live on their own. And what about me? My eyes can't see, my ears can't hear what's going on between them. Whether we lovebirds live amicably, but only in peace, I have not known since then. I wondered if Kelly would bear it, if she'd keep her temper, or if she'd go back to her old ways. She didn't hold back, so she went out again. Claire said yes to Paula. She has. Maybe she inherited it from her parents, but she had a nature that couldn't be overcome. Was my son worth it, to change him for swindlers? He doesn't drink, he can't stand it. Well, he smokes. It's a hard job. He's used to it. He's never tried tobacco before. He's not a bad character. He doesn't pick on little things. He does everything for the house, everything with a smile. Kelly sleeps in the morning and won't go to the baby. I boil sometimes. It's not a good thing for a grown woman to lie in bed until noon, until the sun starts to blaze up her ass, but Harry just smiles. Let her sleep, Mama. She never slept so sweet as she did at your place. How did she do it in her apartment? Claire wondered. I suppose she did. I've only been there a couple of times, and then I've come with my own hotels. She said, "Oh, Mama, how delicious. What pies you bake." She praises them, but she puts store-bought sausage and cheese on the table. I found out later that she started treating Harry badly, too. She'd disappear for a night or two, and he wouldn't say a word, wouldn't bother me. That's when I wished I'd warned him. watch your wife. She's not averse to running off to the left. And then Kelly, our dear Kelly, she started drinking. One day she went to the store and did not return, but now she left with money, all that was at home, earned by her husband, took with her. She will come back, come to her senses and come back. How can she leave her son? Margaret comforted Claire. No, honey, she's not coming back. She's dead. She had an accident. Claire, who had not expected such an outcome, covered her mouth with her hand in fright. Margaret continued her sad story. She was traveling with a man, and they died together, whether it was her half-lover or another unknown. I don't know the details. Harry told me all about it. She sold their apartment together, too, as it turned out. How could she do that? It's a complicated process. Everyone who lives in the apartment has to participate in it. Claire was once again surprised. And they also have a minor child. His share is not allowed to be sold in any case. The guardianship authorities monitor it, because he is defenseless, Adam, and should not remain without registration and without housing. Claire was aware of a lot of the legal laws by nature of her job, so she sold it to some crooks. There's all these black whatchamacallits nowadays. Black realtors? That's what Claire said. Yeah, that's what her half-lover set her up with, and got Kelly to do the paperwork. They got a law against the law. They'll get around anything. They say they even kill people for housing if they get a lonely person who nobody asks if they're alive. And then what? Claire was already looking forward to the denouement. Then she ran away, collected all the coins and ran. The money's been squandered. So Harry came to me with Adam, asked me to look after him. He said I had a contract to finish my work. I let him go. I'm looking after my grandson myself, but it's getting harder and harder every day. While the women were talking in the kitchen, Adam fell asleep. Claire helped her carry the boy to his crib, and then she and Margaret cleared the table. She washed the dishes, and as she fell asleep, she was surprised to think that she hadn't thought of her husband at all for hours. In the morning after breakfast, she thanked the old woman for everything. Margaret, you saved me. I had no one to turn to talk to, and here you are. God brought me to you. Come on, my dear, the old woman said. If it wasn't for me, who else would have found someone else? A man in the world will not be lost. You just don't sit alone. Close yourself. Come out of your resentment. She kissed Adam on his fair head and hugged his grandmother and went home. Promised to come back soon. She really did want to get back to those two as soon as possible, to help as much as she could with them. She didn't want to go home, but there was nowhere to go. She had to solve an unexpected and despicable situation, which was created by the husband she loved before. The husband turned out not to be full of peers at all, as it would have been good if he had spared the woman from finding out about the relationship. Remembering that the best defense is offense, Jordan from the first minute took the form of insulted virtue. He met his wife with indignant words. "Where have you been, Claire?" Saying God knows what to me on the phone, throwing me off my rhythm. "You're sleeping at God knows whose house." Oh, Claire grinned, no longer surprised by Jordan's insolence. "You're out of rhythm, aren't you? And I thought you had already learned to sit on two chairs, to maneuver between two families? Well, I haven't succeeded yet." She saw that Jordan had lost a little of the high ground from which he had intended to speak to her. He shrank back and lowered his head. "Claire," he spoke in a different way, "you have to understand, there's a child in there." I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't going to have an affair on the side, but I couldn't take it. Claire looked at him straight on. "You couldn't stand the lonely idleness while I was courting your father, could you? You wanted a young body, a free relationship. Well, good for you. You're doing great. It's not like that. You're overplaying your hand. I resented you. I'm a man. I need to feel supported and cared for. And I'm a woman, so I don't need anything at all, do I?" Claire was beginning to boil. "You haven't spent a single night with my father. Not once have you offered to help me with the nurse. And I'm a young woman, too. Men still look at me, by the way, even though I've dried up and aged over the years." Jordan had nothing to say, and she was getting more and more atomized. "Do you realize what it means to spend years after a sick old man? How many times I got up to my father every night. How hard it was for me to lift him, to wash him. How I withered without society, without girlfriends. I have none left." Claire cried. They both could not remember how they had been as young people, loving each other and full of life plans. Jordan felt a grudging estrangement from his wife, forgetting everything she had sacrificed so that he could pursue his career in peace. Claire was thrown into shock by Jordan's betrayal. She simply couldn't imagine how he could have gotten to such a point of hypocrisy, though she could now recall many episodes she hadn't paid attention to. Some suspicious or inappropriate words of his, letting them pass her ears. "You're selfish." Blamed her own self after all, Jordan. "You've always been preoccupied only with yourself, with your own needs. Your long lists, your demands, the grocery lists I fed your father, demanding a nurse or a doctor to visit Christopher at home." Claire was no longer able to be indignant. She looked at her husband's flushed, aroused face and couldn't understand how her beloved Jordan could hide in the body, this fat, lustful male, thinking only of himself. What had to happen for a man to change so much? After all, Jordan's mother and father were deeply decent people. A lot of things made sense now. They had lived apart for a long time. Except for Christopher, they had nothing left to bind them together. You wouldn't think of a shared living space as a bond, but as the fruit of a marriage. Yes, and this apartment, for 10 years, became not cozy, abandoned, although they tried to bring it to a more decent form. With the salary that Jordan received, they could have long ago bought a more spacious home to equip it according to the latest fashion, hire a designer and excellent craftsman, but she had no strength, and he had no desire to somehow strengthen the household, and thus the family. And now she is alone at a broken trough. This does not scare her at all. The protective power of the body does not give Claire despair and think about the future. She needs to urgently cut this knot of feelings that has been tormenting her for more than 24 hours, because it is unbearable. Enough. Powerfully, she interrupted Jordan, who was already carrying something completely obscene, purposely atomizing himself. She only heard the words about her infertility, but she didn't care anymore. "Pack your things and leave. You have your own apartment now. You have a wife and a son. Go. I can't promise to die, but you'll finally be Adriana forever. I'll file for divorce tomorrow." "I will," answered the confused Jordan. He did not expect such a quick resolution of the case. Taking the big bag, he slammed the door. Claire only grinned again, noting, "Prepared, packed the bag in advance." 2 months passed, and Claire became a frequent visitor to Margaret and Adam. She did all the housework, looked after the boy and his grandmother, and became very attached to them. She didn't want to stay in her own apartment. First of all, she had gotten used to it over the years. Secondly, she felt stuffy there. Memories came into her head, plunging her again and again into a maelstrom of bad moods and depression. She would only leave for her place in the evening, but in the morning she would deal with the divorce proceedings, grab a bite to eat somewhere on the beach, and wander around the city until she was exhausted. The weather, for Claire, was now good for anything. She treasured every hour of freedom, and the opportunity to enjoy nature and the cityscape. One evening, when Claire was about to go to bed, the phone rang. It was Margaret. The old woman's voice sounded muffled and painful. "Claire, I'm not feeling well. I've called an ambulance. Come to Adam. For God's sake, he'll be alone if they take me away." Claire called a cab and rushed to the boy, taking some of the groceries she had at home. Half an hour later, she was already there. She saw an ambulance at a familiar entrance. Worried, she ran up to the second floor. The doctor had just examined the patient and was washing his hands. "Doctor, what's wrong with her?" Claire asked. "You see, it needs a full examination." The doctor answered evasively. "Her condition is moderately serious. She needs rest. We will take her to the hospital, and the main treatment will be prescribed after the final diagnosis." From that day on, Claire's worries increased. Now she visited the old woman in the hospital, brought her home-cooked food, and comforted her, promising that everything would be all right. Adam never let go of Claire's hand, and Margaret thanked God that she had someone to leave her beloved grandson to. One evening, Claire was putting Adam to bed. She read him a book, laid him on his side, covered him with a blanket, and began to hum a little song. Suddenly he looked over her head and jumped out of bed screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" Claire turned and stood in the doorway with a surprised face. A tall, handsome man froze and looked at her without understanding anything. Then he picked up his son in his arms, kissed him, and asked, "Adam, who is this?" The boy took his father's face in his palms, looked into his eyes, and with complete seriousness whispered, "This is my mother, only it's a secret." The little boy didn't want to let go of his father. "Adam, but Daddy drove a long time, then flew on an airplane. He is very tired and hungry." Claire explained, "All right, feed him." Reluctantly, he let go of his father's hand. "Dad, will you come to sleep at my place?" "Of course, son," the father promised fervently. As always, that's why he was coming. Claire put the boy to bed again and closed the door and went into the kitchen. Quickly warming up the food, she set the table and sat down across from Harry. "I'll feed you for real in the morning, but for now there's nothing else to eat. I'm sure it's a nice dinner after a working canteen." Harry smiled and began to chow down on the soup. Over tea, Claire couldn't help herself. "I know a lot about you, Harry. Your mother told me." The man looked seriously into her eyes. "Well, that's good. I hope to get to know you better, too." 2 years had passed since Harry had discovered Claire in his house. They were married and quite happy. A few months ago, they had moved into the house Harry had bought, a large, spacious house with plenty of room for everyone. Margaret couldn't get enough of her daughter-in-law and kept telling her son that she had found him such a good wife. Adam had long ago called Claire Mama, and she was genuinely happy about it, gifting the boy with unspent maternal love. She was picking out an ice cream cone near the summer kiosk when a man's voice called out to her. Turning around, she saw Jordan. She recognized her ex-husband immediately, but was struck by the change in his appearance. Jordan had grown old and flabby. His stomach hung over the strap of his pants, and he looked untidy and unkempt. "Hello, Claire." Jordan came very close to her and wanted to reach out his hand or hug her, but when he ran into his ex-wife's gaze, he got embarrassed and lowered his hands. "Hello." Claire answered not so much coldly as indifferently. She was deeply indifferent to this strange man, and the meeting did not please her at all. "How are you?" Jordan asked, looking the woman over from head to toe. It was the same old Claire, young, slender, and beautiful. Only better then? Probably over the years, She had gained self-confidence, the kind of confidence that only loving and beloved women have. Jordan did not know how to analyze, but he felt this confidence at once, and with a cold heart, he reached out to his ex-wife. "Good, and you, I see, not too much?" Claire inquired, unable to hide her dislike. "Yes, I'm divorced." Jordan waved his hands in different directions, as if confessing his helplessness. Though Claire didn't ask him any questions, he began to tell her in a hurry. "Adriana, she lied to me. It turned out she didn't have a child with me. I spent 5 years raising someone else's boy. Do you understand, Claire?" He looked at Claire again, as if complaining of injustice and asking for protection. "Well, what can we do? It's not the child's fault," Claire said. And then she made up with her ex and went to him. Just left a note on the table. Some people don't leave notes. Claire grinned bitterly, remembering her past experiences. However, now everything was almost forgotten, and she didn't want to remember. Not to have anything to do with her ex-husband, not even to stand next to him. It was unpleasant for her. She looked away impatiently, waiting for Jordan to make way for her. "Claire, I'm so sorry to you. You know, I miss you so much. Why don't we try to start over? You love me, and I love you. You're too late, Jordan. With your love, I don't need it now." Claire turned away to make herself comfortable, to grab the ice cream bag and walk away, but he grabbed her arm. "Claire, I'm alone, all alone. I won't make the same mistake I made last time, and you're alone too, so why don't we get together? You're childless. Who needs you but me?" "No, I'm not childless." Claire grinned contemptuously. "But that's none of your business." With her head held high, she strode past Jordan while he continued to stare after her. The man saw a tall, handsome man approach the woman. He held the hand of a blonde-haired boy, about 5 years old, and on his neck sat a little girl with dark curls on her head, diligently eating cotton candy. The happy family went on their way. Jordan stood and looked after them for a long time, thinking that he himself had given his happiness to this stranger.